The legendary aura farming system. The legendary aura farming system. My day was going as usual, just following my daily routine while hoping to win the lottery one day, even though I never bought lottery tickets. Sleep, shit, eat, go to school, eat, go back home, eat, homework, shit, eat again, and then sleep. Truly, one of the days of all time, or at least it was, until I saw him, or rather, it, on my way home. The hell? I met it just a block away from my house, right after I turned a corner. Since I was listening to music and was a bit lost in my own world, I didn't quite notice it at first. But when my eyes went up, I saw it. A truck, no, not only a truck, a driverless truck. One that was parked in the middle of the sidewalk with its front pointed directly at me, funnily enough, like it had been waiting for me. At first, I thought nothing of it. A truck in the middle of the sidewalk. Weird, sure, but maybe it was just the truck of some idiot who didn't care about blocking the way to other people and parked it there. Beep, beep. However, the moment it beeped at me, I stopped walking. How the hell did it do that? It was as I asked myself that question that I realized something. Right after it beeped at me, everything in my surroundings seemed to have silenced completely. There was no chirping of birds, no sound of people walking or talking, and no sounds of faraway cars speeding towards work. It was like the entire city had become desolate from one moment to another. Like an apocalypse. The people I swore I had seen around, or even on the other side of the street, all had disappeared as well. I was alone. No. It was now me, and the truck. Broom. The bad feeling I had only intensified when its engine roared into life in a threatening tone, like it was saying, "I've been expecting you." Making cold sweat roll down my back like a waterfall. It was as if something within me knew, I wouldn't be making it back home today. Gulp. As the realization settled in, we locked eyes. Well, I locked eyes with its headlights. Both of us stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. My forehead prickled with sweat as I narrowed my gaze. Quote. It was like a standoff from a Wild West duel. Except in this case, I wasn't a cowboy, and my opponent could squash me flat the moment it decided to charge. For a moment, I considered all this to be part of my imagination, maybe a sign that I had schizophrenia or something, and tried moving away from its path. After all, it was an inanimate object. If I moved out of the way, it wouldn't hit me. But the moment I tried moving, the fucker simply adjusted its direction and kept blocking my way, like saying, "Where do you think you're going?" HMPH. Once I finally realized that this guy wasn't going to give up on me, I snorted and smiled in resignation. So, this is how it ends, huh? It seemed like this was the end of my story, overrun by a fucking supernatural truck that seemed to have picked me over anyone else to fuck with. As the absurdity of the situation sank in, my mind started to wander. What were the chances this was one of those scenarios? The ones where you die and wake up in another world. Maybe after this passed, I'd be getting reincarnated as some badass hero destined to defeat the Demon King. Or maybe I'd just get dumped into a random fictional universe. Or, well, maybe I'd just die, plain and simple. I had no idea what came next. But one thing was clear. I ain't going down without a fight, no sir, I muttered, determination flashing in my eyes. So, I stepped forward, facing the death-made truck without fear. Maybe these fists of mine would do nothing but dent its stupid bumper, maybe not even that, but if there was a thing I knew for sure, it was that I wasn't going down without a fight. That was the right thing to do, the honorable way to go out. Crack, crack. So, cracking my neck left and right, I rolled my shoulder and prepared for the fight that'd decide my destiny. Bam. And so, I kicked the ground, ready to begin with this last dank slip. Sadly, as I was charging toward the truck like a hero in an action movie, I suddenly slipped on something. Then, as my world turned upside down, I felt my head hit the floor, hearing some kind of crunch not long after. Thud. Crack. And just like that, it was over. I lay there, blood pooling around me, my vision swimming around, confused. My neck probably snapped like a twig. And as my life slipped away, I saw it. The true cause of my demise. A banana peel. In the distance, the truck's engine roared again, and then, slowly, it turned around and began rolling away, almost like saying, "My work here is done." Single quote. What the fuck? But before I could process the fucking absurdity of my end, something new appeared in my vision. Due to the lame and pathetic cause of your death, you've been granted the aura farming system. May you have lots and lots of aura in your next life. Man, shut the hell you. Comma. Degree. 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 Years later, somewhere else. Comma. As I finished recalling the memories of my previous life, I couldn't stop myself from facepalming. Really? That's how I died. My name was Takahashi Fukumoto, and just a few seconds ago, the floodgates of my past life's memories opened wide. Why now? No idea. I didn't hit my head, and there was no dramatic moment of revelation. I was just pouring some All Might's puffs into my breakfast bowl, and bam, a vivid replay of my death by some random banana peel in the middle of the road, along with the memories of an alternate self. There was, however, one other revelation that completely overshadowed the rest. This world is from an anime. My local ass was utterly baffled by this discovery. I'd lived a completely normal life in this world, unaware that this Earth, or My Hero Academia world, as it was called back there, was supposed to be a fictional creation. Which kind of annoyed me a bit now. It was like someone had called Earth in my previous world as, I don't know, Harvard World. It kinda crammed the world into a single organization. My foreign ass, on the other hand, was equally stunned. I had reincarnated into a fictional universe. Did that mean the multiverse was real? I sat frozen, staring at my breakfast. A storm of emotions churned inside me. Shock at discovering my new reality. Sorrow over leaving behind an entire life. Envy toward the broccoli-haired protagonist for hogging the spotlight in my world. And, strangely enough, excitement at knowing a bit about what the future might hold now that I possess all this knowledge. After processing all of that, I eventually let out a single, profound response. Damn, that's crazy. Satisfied with my deep reflection, I picked up my spoon again and resumed eating. After all, you can't have an existential crisis on an empty stomach, right? Less than beep. Greater than. Less than host's memory recovery detected. Greater than. Less than initiating system, greater than. And of course this was here, the infamous golden finger, or whatever younglings called it these days. Normally, I'd be over the moon about having a system, but its name killed any enthusiasm I might have had. Less than aura farming system initiated. Greater than. The hell is that? I couldn't help but think. Still, what kind of manners would I have if I didn't at least greet it? Sup. I nodded at the floating text. Less than greetings, host. Greater than. So, you're a system, huh? Less than that is indubitably correct. Greater than. That's crazy. After a short silence, I scratched my cheek awkwardly. This moment was way less exciting than I had imagined. So, what do you do? Less than thanks for asking, dear host. Due to the abysmal amount of aura you lost at moment your death, I was assigned Restore Balance Auratic Universal Value. Greater than. What kind of word was auratic? Less than thus, my primary objective is to enhance your ability farm aura, allowing you accumulate as much possible during lifetime in this world. Greater than. Less than to facilitate this, I will provide various functions that aid you. Here's your status page, for example. Greater than. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 50. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 100. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 0. Total aura, 0. Skills, none. I blinked, a bit confused by what I was seeing. Quote. So, what am I looking at? Less than these are your current stats, determined after a full body scan. You will be able to increase them by harnessing aura and distributing it accordingly. The strength stat enhances the force behind movements, while defense reinforces body against incoming attacks. Greater than. My eyes widened slightly. Damn, so it's literally like an invisible aura cloak around me. Less than indubitably. Although with certain skills, you may eventually make it visible. Greater than. I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. It sounded really good. But then, my eyes landed on the third stat, making me frown slightly before voicing my confusion. What about this, aura projection, stat? Less than yes, unlike the other two, aura projection represents amount of you can harness externally. Think it like mana in a fantasy setting, you'll use for things beyond raw physical enhancement, magic, of course, within constraints what you're due. Greater than. My smile turned into a full-on grin, it was obvious by now that I was pretty excited about what I was hearing. Less than like previously stated, you'll be able to pour the aura you gain eventually into your stats increase them. However, as an energy source over which have absolute control, take away or move between depending on what feel is better, meaning won't rigid. Greater than. Now that gave me a lot of ideas. This thing was amazing, wasn't it? Haha, you had a stupid name, so I figured you'd be a pretty lame system, but I gotta admit, you are kinda cool. Less than I can leave if you want greater than. I nearly fell off my chair at that. See, come on, I was joking, man. This system sure didn't have a sense of humor, huh? Ahem. After clearing my throat and regaining my composure, I asked another question that surged as I stared at the status page. Quote. Hey, this might sound stupid, but how do I actually gain aura? Less than 10 aura, greater than. Oh, come on. Less than that was a joke, host greater than. My smile twitched. I was wrong, it seems this system is quite the comedian. I kinda wanna punch it. Less than aura is gained by performing AWE inspiring actions in front of others. These must elevate the perception others have you. The greater shock value and more spectators present, aura you will gain greater than. So I have to act cool to get stronger. I winced at the thought. The idea of posing like some edgy badass just to power up made me cringe. I had no problem with getting stronger, but being cool. That wasn't exactly my strong suit. Less than do not worry, host. Over time, I will issue various missions that grant you skills and unconsciously refine your actions. Eventually, farm aura naturally, without even realizing or doing so greater than. I made a prayer gesture. Lord hears you, system. Ding. However, a cheerful sound snapped me out of my devoted pose, making me raise an eyebrow as I turned back to the system. Less than now then, let's start with your first mission. Greater than. What? Comma. Change that horrible appearance of yours and make yourself presentable for your next day of school. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle learn proper hygiene and skincare techniques. Filled right pointing small triangle style your hair appropriately. Filled right pointing small triangle present your improved self to your classmates. Filled right pointing small triangle maintain this lifestyle for at least 1 week. Reward. Plus 100 aura, gain the skill clean. Damn. I grimaced at the mission panel. Isn't splashing some water on my face in the morning enough? Less than looking good is the first step to making an impression. Greater than. Alright, I sighed, leaning back in my chair, looking as enthusiastic as I was when I found out school existed. I guess I don't have a choice. For a few moments, I sat in silence, letting it all sink in. But first, I'm gonna go rub one off. There was no better way to de-stress, after a less than 10 aura. This time for real. Greater than. Oh, come on. There's no one here. Less than I'm here. Greater than. Quote. Damn it. Goals. Next day's morning. Comma. Damn. Takahashi sighed as he stepped out of the barber shop, running a hand through his newly trimmed hair. It wasn't anything drastic, just a neater cut, less of a jungle than before. He never really cared about his hair, but apparently, the system did. So here he was, looking slightly more presentable. At least I can finally see in front of me, he muttered, a wry smile forming on his face. Then, his gaze shifted to the bag in his left hand. Inside, a variety of skincare and hygiene products lay neatly packed. A single tear rolled down his cheek as his expression twisted in despair. God damn it, all my savings, gone just like that. He quickly wiped his eyes with his sleeve, suppressing the overwhelming sorrow of his financial loss. Never mind that. It's an investment, Takahashi. It'll be worth it, I think. With that feeble attempt at self-comfort, he shook his head and resumed his walk home. The trip didn't take long. The mall wasn't too far from his place, just a few minutes away. As soon as he stepped inside, he kicked off his shoes carelessly, and while he did that, his eyes scanned the entrance, noticing something. Home alone again, huh? Rolling his eyes, he carried the shopping bag to the bathroom and started unloading the products one by one. Before long, the sink counter was cluttered with dozens of bottles, tubes, and containers, most of which he had no idea how to use. Alright, system, how the heck do I even use all this? Less than 1 aura, greater than. Why? Less than for depending on me like I'm your mother. You're a functional human being, host. Figure it out yourself. Greater than. What are you, my mo? Forget it. Clicking his tongue, Takahashi picked up one of the bottles and turned it around, scanning the label for instructions. It didn't take long to find them, so he followed along, applying the products one after another. As he did that, a brief silence hung in the air. Takahashi squinted at his reflection in the mirror, suddenly aware of how he looked. I feel kinda girly, system. Less than you do look kinda girly with how you're applying them. Greater than. The heck? I'm just following the instructions. Less than instructions mainly written for a female audience. Greater than. God damn it. Takahashi resisted the urge to drop to his knees and contemplate his life choices. All this just for a damn mission. What does the clean skill even do? I swear, if I'm doing this for nothing less than I can't tell you. Greater than. Ah, whatever. He clicked his tongue in frustration. Then, staring at the remaining products with growing resentment, he resumed applying them, though this time, with much less finesse. Rather than carefully dabbing and rubbing them in, he practically smacked the creams onto his face. At least that made him feel a little better. Comma. Degree. 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 The next day, at school. Comma. Takahashi sat at his desk, staring bleakly at his teacher as he entered the classroom. His shoulders slumped, and his expression tired. Taking care of one's skin is exhausting, and I'm supposed to do this for a whole week. I hate this. Should I just give up on the mission? As if responding to his thoughts, the system's mission panel popped open. Change that horrible appearance of yours and make yourself presentable for your next day of school. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle. Learn proper hygiene and skincare techniques. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle. Style your hair appropriately. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle. Present your improved self to your classmates. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle. Maintain this lifestyle for at least 1 week. Reward. Plus 100 aura. Gain the skill clean. I could get 100 aura points, though, Takahashi grimaced. That's basically tripling my strength if I put it all into that stat, or doubling my defense in the other case. Thud. Realizing the reward far outweighed the suffering, he sighed heavily before slamming his head onto his desk. He'd just have to endure this torture for the next week. While Takahashi, or rather, Taka for short, continued sulking, the teacher finally made it to his podium, his expression serious. I've already reviewed your printouts regarding your desired career paths, and I have to say, it's about time you all started taking this seriously. The class immediately fell silent. The teacher's gaze swept over the students like a hawk, his expression stern, until, suddenly, a goofy grin spread across his face. Come on, kids. You all want to be heroes. Are you crazy? Laughter erupted throughout the room. Some students excitedly activated their quirks, showing off as if proving their potential. In an instant, the serious atmosphere had shifted into one of excitement. At least, until the teacher's gaze landed on Taka, whose face was still glued to his desk. Well, everyone except Takahashi. The teacher sighed before sending a scolding look his way. Hey, Takahashi. Snap out of it and write a serious answer. Taka barely lifted his head, just enough to respond while keeping his forehead pressed to the desk. What's wrong with my answer? The teacher snapped a finger at him. What's wrong? You wrote that your life goal is to win the lottery and make love to thousands of women. Taka raised an eyebrow. And, you know what's wrong. Write a proper career goal, or I'll inform your guardian. Groaning, Taka reluctantly took the paper back. I was serious when I wrote this, though I suppose I could choose something different now. Without hesitation, he scribbled something down and handed it back. The teacher gave him a long, skeptical look. You didn't even think about it for a second. Just what kind of nonsense did you write now? Still frowning, he glanced at the paper, and his eyebrows shot up. You want to go to UA and become a hero. Taka didn't say a word. He simply leaned back in his chair, hands in his pockets, exuding an air of indifference. Laughter erupted across the classroom. Ha 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 ha. Did you hear that? Takahashi actually wrote UA. I know he's kind of a joke, but isn't that a bit much? For a quirkless guy, he sure has a great sense of humor. Crack. A sharp sound echoed through the room. A pen had shot across the classroom like a dart, embedding itself right into the center of the desk of the student who had been talking just now with unnatural precision. The whole classroom froze. Eyes widened in shock. No one in class had a quirk capable of something like that. Which meant. Slowly, all heads turned toward Taka. He was still sitting back in his chair, one hand in his pocket. However, the other one was pointing directly at the embedded pen, like a king commanding his subject. His gaze was cold, unreadable. Think again. A heavy silence fell over the room at his words. Taka allowed himself a small glance at the status page floating beside him. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 50. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 100 right pointing arrow 30. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 0 right pointing arrow 70. Total aura, 11 currently in debt. Requires 11 points before new allocations can be made. Skills. None. A bead of sweat rolled down his forehead. Thank God that worked. I wasn't sure if I could control the aura right away, but it seems like I'm a natural. Next, his eyes moved to the changes in his stats, ones he had caused himself. Since the system said I could move points between stats without them being permanent, I wondered if base stats were included in that too. Apparently, yes. Letting out a huff, he flicked his finger, and as if responding to his command, the pencil unembedded itself from the desk and flew back into his hand. Taka stared at it for a second, lost in thought. So this is aura projection, huh? I can't physically feel anything changing, but with just a mental command, the aura envelops whatever I want and lets me control it with ease. It's almost like telekinesis. With that thought, he put the pen down and sighed. The stat is cool, but I should revert my stats to normal. I'm feeling weak as hell. Is this the side effect of taking points from my physical stats? Feeling like he would crumble onto his desk at any moment, but maintaining a tough front, Taka quickly ordered the system to revert his stats. In an instant, his body returned to peak condition, at least by his standards. He wasn't exactly an athlete, after all. After shifting his stats back and losing all points on aura projection, his control over aura disappeared, but at least he wouldn't be knocked over by a strong breeze anytime now. Phew. Less than plus 20 aura greater than. A goofy grin almost broke through when he heard the notification, but he suppressed it before it could show. He had an image to maintain, after all. Good thing I was never a social guy. These idiots don't know me well enough to tell when I'm acting. He snorted, closing his eyes for dramatic effect like some brooding anime protagonist. Perks of being exquirkless, I guess. Since Taka had his eyes closed, he didn't notice the teacher walking toward him. It was only when a loud slam hit his desk that he snapped them open, slowly, as if he didn't care. Not that the sudden noise had startled him or anything. Takahashi, you have a quirk. The teacher blurted out, echoing the question on everyone's mind. I awakened it yesterday, Taka replied nonchalantly. He paused for a second before adding, apparently, I was a late bloomer, not quirkless. Ha! The teacher ran a hand through his hair, clearly in disbelief. His gaze drifted down to Taka's career form. Huh. Well, good luck, I suppose. Taka snorted, his eyes glinting with amusement. I don't need luck. Silence filled the classroom. Taka almost raised an eyebrow, expecting to hear the sweet sound of another aura gain notification. But nothing came. Maybe that was a little too much. I should tone down the edge, just a bit. Challenge. After returning from school, Taka curiously checked his gains for the day. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 50. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 100. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 0. Total aura, 9. Skills, none. Without overthinking it, he ordered the system to allocate all his aura into aura projection, bringing the stat up to 9 points. Rummaging through his backpack, he pulled out the same pen he had used earlier to shut up one of his classmates. Alright, let's see, 9 should at least be enough to lift it, right? Since both of his physical stats were in the 50,100 mark, 9 points were pitiful in comparison, but they should be able to lift a pencil at least, shouldn't they? He squinted and pointed a finger at the pen, not because it was necessary, but because it helped him focus, and because he thought it made it cooler. Gotta enter that mindset, you know. Immediately, the pen lifted into the air, floating above his hand and moving in sync with his finger. Like a director in a band. The only difference from earlier was that it felt incredibly heavy for a pen. At least 7 times heavier. Taka snorted before stopping the technique and stuffing the pen back into his bag. With his little experiment complete, he quickened his pace, eager to get home and rest. But as he crossed the street, he ran into a huge crowd blocking the sidewalk. Their attention was fixed on the road, where a chaotic fight was unfolding. Several heroes were ganging up on a single massive villain, a guy with bulging muscles and antler-like horns sprouting from his back. As Taka's eyes landed on the scene, an unexpected chime rang in his ears. This evildoer can't get away. Help the heroes, and establish your heroic presence early before officially taking on the path of a true aura farmer. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle help the heroes capture the villain. Reward. Gain aura. The amount increases based on your performance. Taka blinked, then glanced back at the villain. Get away or I'll kill all of you. The guy roared, flipping cars and cracking the pavement as he charged forward. He swung at a hero, sending him flying straight through the window of a nearby shop. Crash. The impact happened barely a meter away from Taka. The hero passed by him like a rag doll before piercing the glass. Taka smirked and closed his eyes, the image of effortless confidence. Of course, that wasn't what he was thinking. Ah hell nah. Yeah, he might have gained a quirk, or a system, whatever this thing was, but he was not about to jump into a fight with this guy and die. Without hesitation, he turned around and started walking away. But just as he did, a screen flashed in front of him, blocking his way. Despite being intangible, it felt like a roadblock. Less than don't get discouraged, host. You don't necessarily need to fight the villain. Greater than. Ha. Taka frowned, then glanced at the fight from the corner of his eye. That's when his eyebrows shot up. Oh. For a moment, he stayed silent, simply spectating the battle from a safe distance, with his eyes squinting as if in great doubt. Then, his eyes turned to the rewards of the mission, licking his lips almost by instinct, only to shake his head furiously the next second. Come on Taka, don't let greed blind you. If you screw this up, you're not ending up in a hospital but in a coffin. For a while more, he looked torn between dipping out of there or taking on the challenge. Ultimately, however, he fell for his primal instincts. Alright, let's get that aura baby. Leaving those resolute words, more because he wanted to placate the unease in his heart rather than to express his greed, Taka began making his way back to the crowd, a bead of sweat rolling down his forehead as he approached the chaotic scene. Once he returned to the dreaded place, he dived right into the crowd of people, blending in just like an excited teenager wanting to see heroes in action. Then, when he finally reached the front row, where he had a vast view of the whole battlefield, he began rummaging through his backpack, until he took out what he was looking for. The pencil. Dunno if this will do anything, but I suppose it's worth a shot. He swallowed hard, then opened his status page, sending the system a command. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 50 right pointing arrow 10. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 100 right pointing arrow 10. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 9 right pointing arrow 139. Total aura, 9. Skills, none. Instantly, he almost fell to his knees, gathering a few looks of concern from the people around him who weren't that focused on the fight. You alright, kid? A woman asked, looking at him with concern. Taka nodded, trying his best to maintain a straight face as he pushed himself to stand again. Yeah, I saw a coin and bent to pick it up. An old man from nearby clicked his tongue. Lucky kid. As the attention shifted back to the fight to the death between the heroes and the villain, Taka exhaled exhausted, gritting his teeth as he struggled to stay on his feet. So this is what happens when I take away points from my strength stat, I can barely maintain myself on foot. He swallowed and breathed hard, almost as if he were performing an extremely difficult exercise. Not to mention that now I feel like the punch of a little kid would be enough to break one of my bones. Shaking his head, at least mentally since he didn't know if he had the strength to perform such an extenuating task, he decided to put his complaints for later and got right into action, releasing his hold on the pencil, and dropping it to the ground. However, as it fell, it suddenly stopped before it touched the ground. Then, it quickly began moving swiftly through the crowd, circling around the fighting area like a snake waiting to strike. Taka's gaze darted between the pencil and the villain, gauging the perfect moment to make his move. Then, his eyes widened. One of the heroes, a woman with hammers for hands, began sprinting towards the villain, raising her hand in preparation for a powerful blow. However, the villain caught wind of it pretty quickly and rapidly prepared to intercept the hit, either to block it or to counter it. Now, however, before he could take his stance, a small blur shot from the crowd, moving like a bullet in his direction. Right as he prepared to intercept the hit, the villain felt a sharp pain in the back side of his knee, bending it slightly for a moment, and distracting him for a brief moment, one that lasted enough for the hero to make her move. Clang. UCK. The woman swung her hammer, and with a nasty hit, snapped the villain's head to the side as some teeth, spit, and blood escaped his mouth. The blow sent the giant straight to the floor, his head spinning like never before. He's down, restrain him. It's our chance. Don't let him move. Right away, most of the heroes present moved to restrain the villain while he was down, putting some high-tech cuffs on his wrists. Question mark quote. However, as the heroes restrained the man, one of them noticed a peculiarity. A pencil, embedded right into the man's back of the knee. But just as he was kneeling down to inspect it, squelch. The pencil janked itself free and flew back to the crowd, disappearing from his view in an instant. Frowning, the hero marched toward the crowd. Hey, who used their quirk to attack unauthorizedly? On the other side, Taka smirked faintly as he maneuvered the pencil through the sea of people, letting it weave and dart between them until it reached his side. The hero's suspicion had been successfully misdirected to a group of people away from him, leaving Taka scot-free. With his work done, he exhaled deeply and immediately restored his stats to their original state. His body nearly jumped as the sudden increase in strength hit him, but he forced himself to remain steady. Then, quickly yet discreetly, he tossed the pencil back into his backpack, careful not to touch the blood on its tip. The last thing he wanted was to give the angry hero in the distance a clue about his involvement with the criminal pencil. Just as he secured it, a familiar sound echoed in his mind. Completed. This evildoer can't get away. Help the heroes, and establish your heroic presence early before officially taking on the path of a hero. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle help the heroes capture the villain. Check mark. Less than calculating reward, greater than. Less than plus 65 aura. Greater than. Less than note. While your procedure and execution were flawless, hesitation early on allowed some heroes to sustain injuries. Next time, be more decisive, for the true aura farmer knows his defeat. Greater than. Taka scoffed. Alright, Sekiro. Despite his grumbling, a grin crept onto his face as he glanced at his reward. 65 additional points of aura. That was enough to keep him from draining his basic stats too much and nearly collapsing like before. At least he hoped so. However, just then, his smile froze as a familiar chime rang in his ears. Less than plus 5 aura, greater than. Huh. Wah. He turned in confusion, his gaze landing on the old man from earlier. The elderly man was smiling at him, giving him a firm thumbs up. Taka blinked before offering a wry smile in return. With a slight bow, he quickly slipped away from the scene, vanishing into the crowd and then quickly running away, taking another way to this house. The last thing he wanted was for the old guy to snitch on him with the heroes, despite seeming nice. After a while of running and being out of breath, he finally stood in front of his house. Without hesitation, he opened the door and entered. Uncaringly and evidently fed up, Taka didn't even bother to leave his shoes neatly at the entrance. He simply shook them off with a kick and left them sprawled over there. However, as he made his way inside, ready to go to his room and plummet onto his comfy bed, a figure appeared and blocked his way. Oi, Taka, I heard quite the interesting news today while I was working. Taka's smile twitched, and he glanced at the person who stood before him. A blond man, sporting a ridiculous monkey costume like it was the most natural thing in the world, stood proudly in front of him with both hands on his waist. Your school called me, what's this about having a quirk? Murata Seiji, a professional hero, albeit infamous, called Super Monkey, and Taka's guardian. Examination. The doctor in front of them stared at the pair with wide eyes, his glasses almost falling from the shock. You say young Takahashi here awakened his quirk. At 15 years old, nonetheless. That's right, tell him, kid. Seiji, now out of his monkey costume and sporting a simple white t-shirt and black shorts, patted Taka's back, laughing loudly as he did so. The teenager simply gave the man a look before nodding at the doctor. Yes, I got it yesterday. Before the doctor could ask about its function, Taka pointed his hand at an empty coffee mug lying on the doctor's desk, and, in an instant, the mug flew straight into his grasp, making the doctor widen his eyes and lean forward to inspect the mug in Taka's hand more closely. So it's true. What an unprecedented case. From the looks of it, it's some kind of magnetism, telekinesis, or cup-attracting quirk. Do you know what might have triggered it, young Takahashi? Taka scratched his cheek, acting clueless. Not really. It just came to me when I was having breakfast. Technically, he wasn't lying. The quirk, if it could be considered one, as he honestly had his doubts about what kind of existence the system truly was, had come along right the instant he awakened his previous life's memories, which had been midway through breakfast. The doctor scratched his chin in wonder. How strange, maybe it needed some sort of time requirement. Is controlling cups from afar all it can do, or is it not limited only to cups? If so, how much weight can you control? Taka raised an eyebrow. For a moment, he considered what he was about to say. Should he reveal the full potential of his new quirk, or should he just downplay it? He recalled his previous life's memories about this world. There was supposedly some evil potato-headed guy in a suit out there looking for powerful quirks to add to his collection. So, in hindsight, it didn't seem like a good idea. Still, his quirk made flexing his source of power, so acting like a weakling would be a wasted opportunity to show off and gain some aura. Let's just show what I can do at the moment. I'll leave its potential out of the talk for now. With that plan set in mind, Taka turned to the doctor, his voice cool and his expression impassive. Is there somewhere I can show you? The doctor instantly perked up. Ah, yes. We have a room with equipment specialized for this. He then proceeded to lead Taka and Seiji to what looked like a mental asylum room, only bigger, and filled with all sorts of tools and devices. Over there we have the barbells, they come in different shapes, so pick whichever you like. Taka nodded, and keeping his mysterious and enigmatic silence, he made his way to the barbells. Once in front of them, however, he paused. Crap, his eyebrow twitched. He just realized that he didn't know which one to pick. He hadn't measured the exact amount of weight each aura point allowed him to lift. For all he knew, he might pick the 10 kilograms one, and he'd fold instantly. He had only used it on a pen, after all. It's a gamble, he mused, his eyes inspecting each barbell with an unsure look, before closing them enigmatically, only to open them the next second with determination. But so is life, I'm going all in bitch. Right after, he opened his status page and began moving most of his stats to aura projection, boosting the stat from 79 to a whopping 199 points, while leaving both his strength in the 20s and his defense on the 10s, neither on 0, as he didn't want to collapse mid-examination. As expected, a wave of weakness hit Taka's body right after that, but he dismissed it quickly. He could still stand, after all, and that was all he needed. The next second, Taka raised his hand with the demeanor of a king commanding his subjects, and pointed it at one of the biggest barbells there. The one with the big 500 kilograms imprinted on it. About 1k pounds. And so, with his objective locked in, Taka gave the order. To move. Let's go. Comma. Damn it, move. Sadly, even after a few seconds had passed, the barbell did not budge. No matter how much he pressed, it didn't even do as much as twitch. Seeing he had met his first insurmountable wall, Taka relaxed his grip on the tool and discreetly began moving his hand to a less heavy one. Hopefully, the two behind him wouldn't notice he had failed pathetically. And so, he tried with 250 kilogram. It twitched, but didn't budge. Damn it. He moved his hand again and pointed it at the 150 kilograms one. It moved a bit more, but ultimately, it still remained glued to the floor. Come on, how come 200 points is actually this weak? He eyed the 100 kilograms one with hesitant eyes and aimed his hand at it. This one's moving. Taka's eyes brightened in delight as he felt the object finally budging, though he kept his composed face. Then, he began lifting it more properly into the air, albeit, with still a lot of difficulty, something he didn't show on his face. As a result, after a few seconds of it rising into the air, the weight began swaying and moving around in the air like a UFO. Ho! Seeing the 100 kilograms barbell fly through the air with fluidity, the doctor nodded, surprised. Amazing, it seems you got a really good quirk. Seiji, by his side, nodded with a grin. That's at least an adult man he is lifting. Can you lift more? While Taka struggled to keep the weight on the air, the doctor threw such a question as if it was completely natural while he tapped on a notepad, probably writing information about it. You want more? Taka blinked, and sweat dropped with a troubled expression. It seemed his stunt hadn't been impressive enough to get him some aura. This guy was expecting even more than this. Damn. Taka clicked his tongue. Unfortunately, it seemed he'd have to swallow his pride this time and walk home with no gains. This was his limit, after all. No, this is as much as I can lift. The doctor nodded after hearing his words, but he didn't stop with the questions. Is there any reason why? Does your quirk stop responding if you go beyond your limit? Or do you suffer any pain if you do? Taka considered for a moment before deciding it didn't matter much if he revealed a bit. It'd make for a more believable quirk, having weaknesses, and all that. Well, the more I push it to its limit, the weaker my body begins to feel. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough truth for the moment. Oh. So your quirk works by consuming physical force. How long does your body take to return to its normal state, then? Taka released the weight, causing it to fall to the padded floor. Then, he began closing and opening his fist, as if demonstrating he still had strength in him. Of course, he moved all his stats to their normal state for that. As soon as I stop using it, or diminish the force I'm applying, the strength returns to my body. I see, a very interesting quirk indeed. The doctor nodded as he wrote on the pad. Next, he signaled Taka and Seiji to follow him. Come, I'll do you some more tests. After that, you can go back home. Taka nodded with an uncaring face. Though, damn, he looks like he sees this stuff daily. He discreetly glared at the doctor's unimpressed face and heaved a sigh. Maybe I overestimated my chances of standing out in a place that reviews all sorts of quirks daily. Then, as the doctor opened the door of the room, leading them somewhere else, Taka reviewed his status page once more. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 50. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 100. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 79. Total aura, 79. Skills. None. It seems I have a long way to go before I can begin flexing my skills. Maybe he'd need about 500 points before thinking about impressing anyone. Comma. Degree. An hour later. Comma. Cling. Both Seiji and Taka walked out of the clinic, their expressions completely different from each other. Who'd have thought you'd get a quirk one day? Taka. It seems you can finally stop using the excuse that you don't get girls because you're quirkless. Shut up. Ha ha ha. No, but really, you get your quirk, and you're already acting all serious and broody. What happened to the little prick that I've been taking care of until now that liked to oogle at my porn magazines when I wasn't looking? Taka squinted his eyes, stuffing both hands in his pockets coolly. You are misremembering. This is how I've always been. Seiji simply looked at him with skepticism, arching one of his eyebrows to its limit. Sure, though your internet history doesn't say the same. Taka stopped for a moment, turning to him with a blank expression. Wah, what do you mean? The older man grinned. I'm the one who pays the bills, kid. I can get that information pretty easily. Quote. The young aura farmer seemed a bit lost after receiving that information. You have a refined taste if I say so. Big-tittied. Arg, shut up already. Fortunately, that seemed to have done the job of snapping him out of it. Seiji laughed out loud with a mocking grin. Ha ha ha. Come on, kid, I just wanted to say that I almost can't believe we are not related by blood. We are not so different, you and I. You see, the other day, I almost got a date with a heroine with huge. I don't care. Seiji glanced at Taka with suspicion in his gaze. What, are you in your edgy phase? Maybe your quirk needed you to enter puberty or something like that to finally kick in. Taka gritted his teeth. He was trying to stay in character, for God's sake. Though, that story about the heroine sounded really interesting. No. Fortunately, it seemed Seiji was finally gonna stop fooling around, his tone turning a bit more serious. Anyway, kid, since you now have a quirk, any plans for the future? Taka glanced at him. What do you mean? Well, when I asked if you wanted to be a hero like other kids, you said that as long as you remained quirkless, that'd be a waste of time. Taka raised an eyebrow before looking away, reminiscing about those times. I was like 7 at that time, this guy sure has a good memory. In the end, though, he didn't see any reason to hide his new intentions. Sure, I was planning on trying to go to UA. He replied, keeping his tone casual and calm. Damn kid, you're striking high. Taka simply nodded. Whack. Quote. Question mark exclamation mark quote. Suddenly, he got slapped hard on the back, making him wince slightly and look back at Seiji with dissatisfaction. A look that the man disregarded without a care. Ha 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 ha. It seems you finally decided to follow my steps, huh? Do you want me to contact the hero agency I work at so that they can make you a costume similar to mine? You can try and be Super Monkey Jr. Please don't. Seiji clicked his tongue. You don't know what's good, kid. After the guy's words, black lines appeared on Taka's face, his face turning faintly grim. Ain't no way I'm going out on a costume similar to yours, that'd give me like 1 million aura points the instant I get seen or recorded. Honestly, he simply couldn't figure out how this guy even had fans. His monkey costume was lame as hell. It was an outright terrorist attack on decency and dignity. Anyway, be sure to clear your schedule for all evenings. Seiji's voice suddenly chimed from the side, snapping Taka out of his thoughts. He looked at him, confused. Huh, why? Seiji grinned, though, unlike previous times, this one seemed to hold a hint of savagery on it. What do you mean, why? You heard the doctor, your quirk seems to run on your physical force, so if you want to have any chance at UA, you better start training right now so you don't get whooped like you did today by that 500 kilograms barbell. Taka's face darkened. So you noticed. Seiji patted him on the shoulder. Yeah, so I'm gonna be personally training you from now on until the exam's time comes, so that you don't screw up when you're at UA's practical exam. Taka grumbled, annoyed at how abrupt this was. Sadly, Seiji didn't seem to care in the slightest. Be grateful, for I, the great super monkey, am gonna be personally mentoring you, kid. Taka looked at the endless sky with a vacant expression. This sucks. Clean. A week later. Complete. Change that horrible appearance of yours and make yourself presentable for your next day of school. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle learn proper hygiene and skincare techniques. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle style your hair appropriately. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle present your improved self to your classmates. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle maintain this lifestyle for at least 1 week. Check mark. Less than calculating reward, greater than. Less than plus 100 aura. Greater than. Less than plus skill clean. Greater than. Huh. The notification popped up the moment Taka applied some shady and supposedly hydrating ointment he had bought at a Chinese store to his face. He immediately dropped the product like it was toxic, before tossing it into the never to be touched again corner of the bathroom. His usually deadpan expression broke into a bright grin. He was free. Sure, his skin did look cleaner than it had ever been, but he couldn't care less. The effort it took was simply not worth it, at least for him. There may be weirdos out there who are willing to put up with it, but not him. He simply wasn't one of them. Now that the quest was finally over, he could stop wasting his mornings applying weird goop in front of the mirror for hours and instead do, anything else. What exactly? Taka himself had no idea. But free time was free time. So, sighing in relief, Taka smirked confidently at his reflection and pulled up the status page, dumping all the newly gained aura into aura projection, or AP for short, since typing the whole thing out is starting to get annoying. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 53. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 106. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 179. Total aura, 179. Skills. Filled right pointing small triangle clean. Taka grinned. His AP was now almost back to what it had been during the quirk test a week ago. Lacking just 20 points, but that much was negligible. If I throw in my other stats as a backup in case I need that extra aura, I should hit over 300 points in AP. Wonder how much I'd be able to lift then. He raised a hand, counting on his fingers. If 199 points barely let me lift that 100 kilograms dumbbell, that means each kilo needs about 2 aura, 1 aura equals 1 pound. So with 300 AP, I should be able to lift that 150 kilograms, 300 pounds, one I could only make twitch before. Finished with his math, Taka nodded, satisfied. A 50% strength increase in just 1 week. That was massive. Next up, the other reason he endured the whole grooming quest in the first place. His eyes darted to a specific point on his status page. The clean skill. I swear, if it's something useless, I'm gonna, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'll do something, that for sure. So, with the resolution to do something, in the case the skill let him down, he tapped on the skill, and a new screen popped up with its description. Clean, passive. Description. A proper aura farmer can't go around dirty and unkept. This skill grants your aura cleaning and purifying properties, so you can be clean at all times. Filled right pointing small triangle automatically keeps all parts of your body clean at all times. Filled right pointing small triangle dirtiness does not stick to your body for long. Filled right pointing small triangle impurities no longer surge on your skin. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection can be used to apply this effect to clothes as well. Ha! Taka stared, dumbfounded, as he let out a loud exclamation. He wasn't mad, despite what his earlier tone might have implied. Just confused. This definitely wasn't what he expected. Though, to be fair, he didn't even know what he had expected from a skill called clean. But still, It looks useful. He raised an eyebrow. Still a bit unsure, he ran a hand through his hair. Whoa. It felt like he had just stepped out of the shower, smooth, light, and grease-free, even though he hadn't bathed since yesterday. Next, he glanced around the room with squinted eyes to make sure he was alone, despite being in his own bathroom. When he was sure no one was watching, he raised an eyebrow, cleared his throat, and looked around innocently, while one hand slipped into his pants. A few seconds later, his hand came out, and went straight to his nose. Damn. With extremely raised eyebrows, Taka washed his hands and left the bathroom like nothing happened, leaving behind a crime scene with no witnesses. Except for the unfortunate few still reading this. With a confident stride, he made his way into the living room, where he came across a wild Seiji, sipping morning coffee on the couch while bobbing his head to music only he could hear. The instant he stepped into the living room, Seiji noticed Taka and shot him a mocking smirk upon seeing the young Aura farmer's satisfied look. Well, don't you look good? Maybe I should amp up the training. Taka deadpanned. No, please. Ever since a week ago, after Taka underwent the quirk test and had both the doctor and Seiji think his telekinesis worked by consuming his physical force, Taka had been forced to undergo special training to build up his strength by Seiji. Naturally, Taka had tried to refuse at first. He wasn't exactly the training type. He didn't get a rush of dopamine each time he pushed his limits, the only thing that came after each, plus ultra, was a wave of nausea. A light one, but nausea nevertheless. Unfortunately, like the obedient little system slave he was, all it took to change his mind was a shiny new quest. This is the start of your aura farming path, and as is to be expected of you, you must be prepared for the many hurdles ahead. Endure the brutal training, and ascend, ready to carve your path to glory. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle. Do not use your aura to boost your physique in any way during training. Filled right pointing small triangle. Complete at least 1 month of training without missing a single session. Filled right pointing small triangle. Get your fighting skills acknowledged by Murata Seiji. Filled right pointing small triangle. Get your physical condition acknowledged by Murata Seiji. Reward. Plus 200 aura. Gain the skill. Trouble radar. After that damned quest notification popped up, Taka had given in and started training without complaint. A week had passed since then, and after all of it, his strength and defense stats had gone up by 9 points total. Strength 3 points, and defense 6. He wasn't sure if that was fast or not, but seeing his stats rise without spending a single point of aura. That was a pleasant surprise. It motivated him to endure the training, as that way, there would be more, emergency use only, aura points to spend. Of course, that didn't make the training any less brutal. Taka had never worked out so much in his entire life. Seiji really went all out with the planning of his training. Not a single muscle was left untouched after each session. Ha ha ha, come on. Seeing your dying face yesterday was amazing. Seiji chuckled. Taka grumbled and turned away. Fuck you. He grabbed his backpack and made for the door. But just as he was about to leave, Seiji called out to him. Hey, Taka. What? Have a nice day. Quote. Taka raised an eyebrow. Cuz I'm increasing the intensity of your training once you get back. Quote. Black lines appeared on Taka's forehead. Without saying a word, he simply opened the door and left the house. Degree. Hours later. The hell is this? Taka found himself cornered by 3 of his classmates. The day had been going smoothly. He was no longer ridiculed for being quirkless, and after his power move last week, most of the class just ignored him. But then these 3 suddenly popped up next to his seat after class ended, and forced him to follow them to a hidden corner of the school. Not that it was shocking. These guys weren't exactly model students, and everyone knew they had ties to shady guys. So, yeah, it wasn't exactly a surprise when they pulled something like this out of nowhere. Oi, Takahashi, you've been acting all smug this past week, haven't you? Yeah, it's already starting to piss us off. Just cuz you got a quirk now doesn't make you better than us. Wipe that smug look off your face. Taka raised an eyebrow, confused. This was just his normal face. Unfortunately, it seemed his normal face was exactly what pissed them off. Hey Takeo, this guy's seriously getting on my nerves. Yeah, Toshio, he's still looking smug even after our warning. What should we do, Aniki? The biggest of the 3, Shoji, sneered. A vicious grin spread across his face. I think we should show him why he needs to learn to keep his head down. At that instant, his two minions smirked and moved in to grab Taka by the arms, locking him in place. With his target restrained, Shoji grinned wider, then slammed his knee into Taka's gut, folding him in half. His cronies chuckled like it was the funniest thing they'd seen all week. Sadly, their smiles didn't last. Taka slowly unfolded himself, completely unbothered, and stared at them with an unreadable expression. You done? The three froze, shocked by the calmness in his voice. Wasn't he supposed to be gasping for air right now? Taka, meanwhile, glanced at his status window. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 53. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 106 right pointing arrow 285. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 179 right pointing arrow 0. Total aura, 179. Skills. Filled right pointing small triangle clean. This thing's seriously convenient. Smirking widely at how effective the stat interchanging was, Taka then gave the two still in shock delinquents on both sides a look and poured all his aura into strength with a savage grin, boosting it up to 232, basically multiplying his raw strength nearly fivefold. Then, with one casual swing of his arm. Whoa. Og. He sent the two goons grabbing him flying like potato sacks. Wah. Shoji could only gape as his friends hit the ground in crumpled heaps. But his pride wasn't about to let him back down. You dare. With a roar, he charged, fists erupting in flames. Taste the difference between our queer. He didn't get to finish that sentence. Taka raised his hand in the blink of an eye, and Shoji suddenly found himself floating several meters in the air. His so-loved quirk useless as in the air he was completely at Taka's mercy. What the? Put me down. He screamed, flailing like a brat whose mommy had said no to him for the first time. Taka just smirked, thoroughly amused. And then he started spinning Shoji. Fast. Like, Blender on max fast. SSSSSTUOP. By the time Taka graciously returned him to the ground, Shoji was green in the face, and instantly threw up his lunch. Blurg. Still smirking, Taka turned to the two goons lying on the ground, who were now staring at him wide-eyed, utterly speechless after witnessing their leader get absolutely decimated. Still, the fire in their eyes hadn't completely gone out. They got up, rage-ridden all over their faces. Then. Sorry, Aniki. They turned and bolted, leaving Shoji alone with Taka. Quote. 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 The two stared silently at the fleeing duo. In the end, Taka gave the stillnousus Shoji a pat on the shoulder, then turned around and began to walk away. Just leave me alone from now on. Shoji didn't respond. He looked like he might throw up again at any second. With that, Taka casually walked off. He paused, however, when a notification popped up in his vision. Less than plus 30 aura. Greater than. He raised an eyebrow, confused. Then, as he turned the corner, there they were. All of his classmates. Just standing there, awkwardly trying to act nonchalant, pretending they hadn't seen anything. These guys were watching. He deadpanned. Seriously, didn't they have anything better to do? Well, I was having trouble finding moments to be cool. I guess this works too. Pleased with the unexpected bonus, he instantly redirected all his new points into AP, bringing the stat up to 209, and strolled past his classmates, keeping his expression cool and unbothered. At this rate, by the time UA's entrance exam rolled around in 9 months, it'd be a walk in the park. Or rather, a perfect aura farming spot. Taka smirked deviously. Comma. To be continued. Fair warning, most skills Taka will gain will be for aura farming, not for increasing his power. This isn't a power fantasy, or maybe it is, but you know, the main focus is flexing as much as possible. Of course, I might always change my mind if I feel patreon.com/thesynonym. You know the drill. More chapters at my Patreon, and you help me make ends meet while at it. What's with these missions? A month later. Comma. Come on, Taka, don't tell me you're going down already. Seiji shot Taka a disdainful look as the kid now lay on the ground, sprawled and beaten. A cigarette flicking at the corner of his lips. Taka groaned as he pushed himself up, looking at him with an annoyed glare. Shut up, man, it's not my fault a damn monkey quirk can be so stupidly overpowered. This is called hard work. Seiji scoffed, taking his cigarette away from his mouth and tapping it twice, letting the cinders fall. When I was your age, the only thing my quirk gave me was these big ass hands and a long ass tail to whack people with. So quit your whining and get here. Don't tell me this is all you can do after an entire month of training. Taka stood up while grumbling under his breath, looking at Seiji with an annoyed gaze. You say it like it was a long-ass time. It's only 4 weeks, damn it. How the heck am I supposed to master all the shit you taught me, especially when after each session you leave my body aching like hell? Skill issue, kid. All I am asking is that you fight properly, not excellently. Or don't tell me you think it's fine to try and become a hero with the skills you had in our first class. You tripped yourself after throwing a punch. KGH. Taka clicked his tongue like a Dragon Ball character, and naturally, his eyes drifted to a floating screen beside him. This is the start of your aura farming path, and as is to be expected of you, you must be prepared for the many hurdles ahead. Endure the brutal training, and ascend, ready to carve your path to glory. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle. Do not use your aura to boost your physique in any way during training. Filled right pointing small triangle. Complete at least 1 month of training without missing a single session. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle. Get your fighting skills acknowledged by Murata Seiji. Filled right pointing small triangle. Get your physical condition acknowledged by Murata Seiji. Reward. Plus 200 aura. Gain the skill, Trouble Radar. A month had already passed, and as such, he had fulfilled the first 2 objectives of the mission. Albeit one of them would receive its check mark once the mission was over. The other 2, however, had no time limit to be fulfilled. They all depended on Seiji and his opinion on his progress. He couldn't even boost his physical stats using his gained aura so far, since the quest specifically told him not to. He could only do this fair and square. The horror. With a scoff, Taka put his hands up once again, ready to begin throwing once again. And he threw, yes sir. Bam. Less than 10 seconds later, he was easily thrown to the ground by Seiji, who simply tripped him. Not even using a lock or throw on him. Damn it. Seiji knelt beside Taka, who now lay on his back on the ground, staring at the air like questioning his life choices, and threw him a dissatisfied look. Look, kid, I don't think you're focusing right now. You're throwing punches just to throw. Taka groaned, giving him a side eye. What's that even supposed to mean? Seiji sneered, flicking the cigarette on his mouth to the other corner, before tapping into Taka's temple with his feet like a woodpecker bird. It means thinking properly about what I'm going to do, and what you should do in response. That's the use of all those flashy moves I've been teaching you so far. They're the responses, you use them when it's time, not when you feel like it. Taka didn't say anything, watching silently as Seiji let out a sigh and stood up, giving his back to him as he walked away. Whatever, kid. Let's do this again tomorrow. Be sure to practice today so you don't suck as bad tomorrow. Wait. Taka quickly stood up. Seiji turned, a sly smile appearing on his face. You're not him, kid. He said, smiling mockingly as he shook his head. Stay on the ground. Just cause you got motivated doesn't mean you're gonna do any better. That's not it, Taka said, pointing at Seiji's crotch. You got your zipper down. Seiji's face instantly fell, and in a hurry, he turned down to fix his improper state. Only, his zipper was fine. This kid. Seiji's eyes widened, and he lifted his head back in a hurry, watching as Taka lunged at him with hands open like claws. In a hurry, he sent a palm strike to Taka, trying to keep him away, only for his attack to get deflected to the side the instant it had been about to make contact. Then, mid-movement, as his palm was pushed aside, Taka lowered his stance, and with his remaining hand, fingers curled like the nails of a dragon. Clang! He struck Seiji's nuts. Ah! Seiji's eyes widened like saucers, cold sweat pouring down his back as he glanced into Taka's cold, unyielding eyes. His mouth trembling as he spoke. Monkey grabs the peach, you copied my signature move. Indeed. Taka closed his eyes solemnly, retracting his hand as he turned his back on Seiji, who was already dropping to his knees, both hands clutching his crotch, face twisted in agony. Now, fall. Leaving those words behind, Taka walked away, hands coolly stuffed into his pockets. Less than +5 aura greater than. Suddenly, Taka lifted an eyebrow and looked back over his shoulder. Seiji, despite his scrunched up face of pain, was giving him a thumbs up. That was a cool one, kid. Write that down. It'll make the ladies go crazy. Taka looked at him weirdly for a second before he gave a faint nod. Will do. Then, for real this time, he walked away, ignoring Seiji as he collapsed fully to the floor and had his soul ascend into heaven. Completed. This is the start of your aura farming path, And as is to be expected of you, you must be prepared for the many hurdles ahead. Endure the brutal training, and ascend, ready to carve your path to glory. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle. Do not use your aura to boost your physique in any way during training. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle. Complete at least 1 month of training without missing a single session. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle. Get your fighting skills acknowledged by Murata Seiji. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle. Get your physical condition acknowledged by Murata Seiji. Check mark. Less than calculating reward, greater than. Less than plus 200 aura. Greater than. Less than plus skill, trouble radar. Greater than. Less than note. Although an unconventional path to achieve those last two conditions, it was well thought out. Stand proud, for your as a professional aura farming is about start. Greater than. A small smirk curled on Taka's lips as the notification popped up beside him. Comma. Degree. 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 Minutes later. Comma. In his room, Taka now lay sprawled on his bed, checking out his new gains with amusement. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 61. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 122. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 215. Total aura, 215. Right pointing arrow, 415. Skills. Filled right pointing small triangle clean. Filled right pointing small triangle trouble radar. Now this is what I call good progress. He grinned as he dumped all of his newly gained aura into AP, making the stat shoot up to 415. Next, he opened his new skill, already dying to know what it did. Trouble radar active. Description. Real life can often be boring and uncool as heck, making it difficult for an aura farmer like you, someone who thrives on attention and shines through impossible odds, to grow smoothly on your path to becoming the ultimate aura farmer. With this skill, you'll never miss those rare moments when an aura farmer can truly stand out. Filled right pointing small triangle grants you a sixth sense that can be toggled on or off at will. It points you toward the place where trouble is most likely to begin brewing, or to immediate danger coming your way. Filled right pointing small triangle can also faintly gauge the level of incoming trouble, from minor inconvenience to world-ending catastrophe. Fate is unpredictable, tread with caution. Huh. Taka raised an eyebrow. Another skill he wasn't sure how to feel about. Sure, it seemed like it'd be useful for powering up until UA's practical exam in 9 months. But the idea of actively being on the lookout for trouble, that was something else. Especially because trouble in this day and age usually meant one thing. Villains. Like the skill warned, if he didn't tread with caution, especially now, with his aura basically in its baby stage, dying wasn't off the table. In his parallel life, he might have scoffed and jumped into things without thinking. After all, this was a world from an anime, and villains didn't seem that bad when you were just a viewer. But now that he had a whole second life in this world, and memories of his past one, that illusion had long since faded. Dealing with villains here was like messing with terrorists back on Earth. Yeah, not exactly appealing, huh? Cold-blooded people with no qualms about killing, at least the serious ones, not the occasional purse snatcher. That's what villains were. So yeah, he had every right to eye the skill with a healthy dose of caution. Still, if he wanted to power up, there was no way around it. Though, if the trouble seems too much, I'm just dipping out. Taka nodded to himself, reassuring his ego. He wouldn't overestimate his ability. If it got too hot, he'd just leave it to the pros. That's what heroes were there for, weren't they? With that resolution, he finally let out a breath of relief. It hadn't really hit him until now, but after a month and a half of non-stop training missions, he was finally free. He could focus on doing other things, maybe even relax a bit. Less than new mission. Greater than. Now that you're capable of holding your ground, barely, it's time to focus on other aspects of being the perfect aura farmer. Not everything in life is about fighting, so sharpen your other skills and avoid becoming a one-trick pony. Aura farming is everywhere in life, so broaden your view. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle practice a type of art for a month. Filled right pointing small triangle dominate the basis of said art. Reward. Gain aura depending on your performance beyond what is asked of you. Gain the skill. Connoisseur. Taka blinked at the floating screen, thoroughly unamused. What's with these missions, man? He flopped back onto the bed, already regretting jinxing himself. What was even the point of learning art? How was that supposed to help with his aura farming? Sure, people would like what he did, for example, drawing, but would simply liking his drawings grant him aura? As far as he knew, the feelings of people had to go beyond that for there to be any cashable aura. So it seemed really unlikely any art would be worth the trouble of learning, considering the time he'd need to master it to a level where aura would just then start being gained. For that, he could just fight some random ass villain in the street to show off, and get done with it. He scoffed and glanced at the mission description again. Maybe I can just ignore this mission. Even the aura to be gained depending on performance may be a small amount, considering it is not specified. For a moment, he looked at it with a tired expression, already fed up with having to go out of his comfort zone purely for the aura points. But then, his eyes twitched, a certain thought popping into his head. Aura farming is everywhere in life. That line stuck with him. It echoed for a moment, like guiding his train of thought as a certain idea began brewing. Until it fully formed. Say, system, Taka smiled, looking slyly at the screen floating beside him. When aura farming, do people necessarily have to be physically near me for me to gain the aura? What if I'm being cool online? Would the aura still reach me, even if they are kilometers away? Analyzing question. Answer. Your quirk draws in the energy produced by awe and relatively similar feelings from people near you. The system's function is to harness this energy and prevent it from dispersing. If people are too far away, the energy may dissipate before the system can absorb it. However, if the number of people generating such feelings is large enough, the energy may persist long enough to reach you. Note: a significant portion of said energy will likely be lost in transit. Taka frowned, looking at the screen, thoroughly confused. What do you mean by my quirk? I thought I was quirkless. Are you referring to yourself? Negative, you have always possessed a quirk. However, due to its nature being practically indetectable as you could do nothing with the aura you gathered, and you not drawing off from your peers often at all, there was never a concentration high enough to be noticed by you or anyone around. Ouch. Taka's eye twitched at the jab. That hit a little too close. Yeah, since he was a kid, he'd basically given up on getting along with people once he got labeled as quirkless. Never bothered to put on a good face, and never tried to impress. He didn't get bullied, but he for sure wasn't especially liked. So, yeah, the math checked out. Loner equals no aura. Still, he couldn't help but feel speechless at the revelation that he was never quirkless to begin with. He actually had a quirk. Albeit a useless one, if not for the system here. He deadpanned, though this time, he gave the screen a slightly more appreciative look. As he slowly came to terms with this new truth, not world-shattering, but still something, his mind circled back to that earlier idea. A small smirk curled on his lips. So I could actually gain aura online. His eyes gleamed with interest, the idea of a video going viral and aura raining from the sky practically making him giddy. Okay, maybe not giddy. But interested, very. Though his enthusiasm dipped slightly at that whole part about most of the energy dissipating, it still didn't kill the idea. This could be another viable method of aura farming, one that didn't involve nearly dying for the cool factor. His eyes drifted back to one of the conditions from the mission. Practice a type of art for a month. If he combined this assignment with his new plan to go viral. Yeah, he might be onto something. Comma. To be continued. Plans are forming, and gains and growing. Check that one out. Just thought about it now. 10 comments 0 vote. I need more power. A month later. Comma. Well, this idea sucked, Taka muttered, glancing at the laptop in front of him with dissatisfaction. He had, in fact, not been onto something. It had already been an entire month since he had received the new mission of learning a type of art, and after very little deliberation, he chose the guitar. Why? Because if he wanted to aura farm, it was the best instrument. You don't see chicks going crazy for the pianist, drummer, or bassist, right? The one getting attention was always the guitarist. Of course, singers were also pretty popular, so it was also a choice, but his voice honestly wasn't very melodious. So, he just chose the guitarist path. As for where he got a guitar, considering he was out of funds after spending all his savings on skin care. Well, Seiji seemed to have one taking dust on a corner of the house. When Taka asked him for it, the guy just shot him a disbelieving look before waving him off as he muttered, "So you're at that age, huh?" And like that, he got a guitar. A month passed since then, with him practicing with the instrument and learning not to suck. During it, however, Taka decided to try uploading his process on QuirkTube. awaiting the moment his videos would explode in popularity, and aura would begin raining like crazy. Sadly, as may be evident from how he complained earlier, that didn't happen. Not to mention that he forgot to account for the fact that him just showing his progress on learning it wouldn't generate much aura, if any at all. To top it off, he also barely received any visits on his videos. He had gotten, like, 10 subs throughout the span of these 4 and something weeks. Truly, a disappointment of a project. Who could have thought becoming famous would be such a hassle? Taka grumbled, turning his laptop off and glancing at the ceiling with a lazy expression. Of course, his attempt at going viral was secondary. His main concern was the mission, which was going fairly well. Now that you're capable of holding your ground, barely, it's time to focus on other aspects of the perfect aura farmer. Not all in life is fighting, so be sure to sharpen your other skills so you're not only a one-trick pony. Aura farming is present in all actions. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle. Practice a type of art for a month. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle. Dominate the basis of said art. Reward. Gain aura depending on your performance beyond what is asked of you. Gain the skill. Connoisseur. If it weren't for that last condition that he had yet to fulfill. What does the basis even mean? I'm pretty sure I already learned most of what there's to know. Taka grumbled, squinting his eyes as he glanced at the mission screen. If he had to say so himself, he already could play fairly well, when not rushed or under pressure. And he might sometimes make mistakes. And he might forget the notes from time to time. But he could play, and that was all that mattered. So he didn't know what this damn system wanted, but he assumed all that was left for him to do was to keep practicing until he eventually fulfilled that last condition and took that aura and skill with him. What does connoisseur even mean anyway? With a grumble, he got up and left his room. He walked into the living room, meeting once again a wild Seiji reading a newspaper with an amused expression. Noticing him, Seiji smiled and pointed at the newspaper, showing it to him like it was some incredible discovery. Hey, kid, look at this. Some kids your age just did something crazy. Taka raised an eyebrow and took the paper, eyeing it with curiosity, until he saw the cover. It was an image of Bakugo trapped inside a mud monster, and Midoriya running after him to save him. His eyes squinted faintly. The article explained pretty much what had happened in the anime, with All Might helping them at the last minute and saving them from the mud villain. Besides that, it didn't offer much information. Just a few declarations from All Might, the list of crimes of the mud villain, and the usual spicy stuff to anger someone. None of that mattered to Taka, however. His mind was focused on something else. That guy is already hogging the spotlight, huh? He clicked his tongue, eyeing with annoyance the green-haired kid in the image. Without a word, he returned the paper to Seiji, who looked at him with an odd expression. What's wrong, kid? Nothing. Taka ignored him and walked to the door. I'm going out. Seiji tilted his head. What? Where are you going so suddenly? To buy stuff, I'm hungry, Taka replied without looking back. Seiji scoffed, shooting him a deadpan look. Already spending your allowance. The month is barely starting, kid. Try to make it last. If you gave me more, it'd last longer. Ha, you wish. With a mocking smirk, Seiji lifted the newspaper and proceeded to ignore Taka, who looked at him with an annoyed glare. Stingy prick. With a curse under his breath, Taka opened the door and left. Swearing in his mind to one day find something to blackmail Seiji to increase his allowance. Minutes later, as he walked through the street, Taka let out a quiet grumble, glancing up at the sky with a scowl. My time is running out. As he mumbled that, he pulled up his status screen with a displeased frown. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 66. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 132. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 430. Total aura, 430. Skills. Filled right pointing small triangle clean. Filled right pointing small triangle trouble radar. There were only 10 months left until the UA entrance exams, until the anime's main events began unfolding. Right now, he was way stronger than he'd been 2 months ago. And by the time the exams came around, he'd probably be even stronger. With Seiji's training still underway, his physical stats were steadily increasing. So he'd probably be pretty fit by then, even without using his aura to boost his physical stats. And his AP, well, it was unnecessary to mention it was his favorite stat. Being able to use telekinesis was awesomely convenient. When he was in bed and needed to stand up to pick something, he could just use his AP to bring it to himself. And that was pretty much the only use he was giving it. But well, regardless of the menial tasks it was being subjected to, its growth was undeniable, and Taka would probably continue pouring his aura on it whenever he got more. If he had already gained over 400 aura points in around 3 months since getting his system, how much higher would it get by the time the exam happened? Would he reach the 2000 points? Maybe even more. He was awaiting it expectantly. Suddenly, Taka's look full of anticipation turned slightly more moody, glancing ahead with a squint of eyes. But will it be enough? Midoriya would enter UA practically powerless. Total baby tire. But within a single year, the guy would shoot up to All Might levels. Taka would have a head start, sure. He'd be strong right from the beginning if he reached the 2000 aura mark by then. That was a ton in terms of force, after all. But who was to say he wouldn't be outpaced? He didn't know how strong All Might was in terms of stats, but judging from his feats, he was sure the guy was pretty far ahead of his current self. Maybe in the hundreds of thousands. In the millions. So, for Midoriya to reach that guy's level in merely a year, Taka couldn't help but ask himself, would it be possible for him to also have that level of speed in his growth? Would he really be able to keep up with the protagonist of this world? 'Cause if he didn't, then his entire plans of aura farming would come down as Midoriya hogged the spotlight all to himself. He needed to stay on top, mark the difference clearly from the very beginning. A difference the guy wouldn't be able to cross, even with that protagonistic luck of his. Taka narrowed his eyes, then finally closed them. In that case, I guess I should start taking this a bit more seriously. With that resolution, he commanded the system to activate that. Trouble radar activated. Instantly, Taka felt something, a faint, eerie sensation in the vicinity, not too far, actually, it was just around the corner. Opening his eyes, he quickly made his way toward the source. Not wanting to miss anything. When he arrived, though, he saw nothing. Just the usual bustling street he sometimes passed through. Hold up. He squinted. A hero had just stepped into the street, quickly gathering attention as people surrounded him, asking for autographs. If he recalled correctly, the hero's name was Force Kick, a colleague of Seiji. However, what truly caught Taka's attention was that despite the crowd surrounding him, the hero's eyes scanned the area intently, as if looking for someone specific. Taka immediately picked up on what may be happening, and with the quickness of a normal teenager with no vision-enhancing quirk, he began scanning the crowd himself, eyes sharp. It took him a while, and nothing seemed out of order. But then, he saw it. Someone in the crowd shifted, their appearance warping for a split second. A flash of reptilian features surfaced before the figure morphed into another look entirely. Taka's eyes widened. That was it. These two were about to fight. Maybe he was being mutant-phobic, but judging from how the guy looked like he was hiding, and the hero being on the lookout for something, plus his trouble radar telling something was about to happen here, Taka immediately came to the conclusion that the reptile-like guy was a villain escaping, and that soon Force Kick would discover him, giving place to a fight. That, or a car crash would happen. That was also possible. But for now, he was gonna lead into his first supposition. But what should I do? This didn't feel like a high-threat incident. Nothing catastrophic. So there was no need for him to jump in. But that didn't mean there wasn't an opportunity. What was the best way to aura farm from this? Attacking the villain right away was an option, except he wasn't completely sure the guy was a villain. Plus, Taka would get in trouble later if he attacked with his face and identity exposed. He didn't have a hero license, after all. So, yeah, for now, that was discarded. For now. Damn, aura farming really is troublesome. He groaned, rubbing his chin with a deep, thoughtful expression. Intel. His eyes lit up. A spark of inspiration hit. That's it. Without another word, he turned on his heel and bolted back home, a wide grin stretching across his face. Comma. Degree. Minutes later. Comma. Just like Taka had predicted, the hero eventually spotted the chameleon quirked guy, and a fight broke out. Force Kick's quirk consisted of producing small bursts of energy from his feet, which could be used for both mobility and for combat, enhancing his kicks and his running speed. The chameleon's quirk, on the other hand, not only let him copy people's appearances, as it'd be expected of such a quirk, but also gave him enhanced agility and a long, powerful tongue that he could use to attack. Both combatants were fine. Nothing special. Middle of their road power levels. But that meant the fight lasted a while. Neither side gained the upper hand. The hero held his own, but the villain wasn't being overwhelmed either. The chameleon's only real threat was that more heroes might arrive and tip the scales. For now, though, he held his ground. All he needed was the right chance to slip away. Chaka-chan. But then, the sound of an electric guitar strummed sharply across the city block, cutting through the noise of battle. Both combatants were startled mid-motion, halting just before their next clash. They looked around, confused. Then they saw him. Perched atop a building, overlooking the fight with both legs crossed and an electric guitar in his grasp, was a figure dressed in a black hoodie that cast his face in shadow. A dark mouth mask obscured the rest of his features. The only thing visible were his eyes, sharp, black, and fixed directly on them. Behind him, a compact kit of amplifiers stood humming softly, making sure every strum of his guitar echoed powerfully across the street below. Both hero and villain glanced at the newcomer in confusion, darting looks at each other every now and then, as if asking, "Can you believe this?" The crowd around was just as stunned. What was this guy doing? Fortunately, they would get their answers right away. Without a word, the figure tightened the grasp on his guitar and began to play. To be continued. I don't know how to play music, so don't expect perfect realism, and while I also don't know how to do many things Taka will do, so the same applies for that. Whatever unrealistic part, let's simply attribute it to the great system. Also, if we reach 100 power stones, I'll be uploading an extra chapter. 14 comments 0 vote. Success. Song Taka is playing. Future in my hands Devil May Cry, instrumental only in his case, but hear the full song either way. The entire avenue was dumbstruck as the unknown guy began playing a catchy song out of nowhere, still sitting on the edge of a rooftop, casually strumming while the villain and hero stared at him in disbelief. The blatant disrespect was staggering. What the hell was this guy doing in the middle of a battle? Still, he's kinda good, that thought echoed in more than a few heads, some people in the crowd instinctively bobbing along to the rhythm of the guitar solo. However, not everyone was entranced by the music. The chameleon villain, though momentarily confused, soon smirked, clearly thinking this was the perfect distraction to slip away. Force Kick was still staring at the black-clad figure above, trying to make sense of what was even happening, making this the perfect moment to get away. Kukuku, I don't know who this weirdo is, but thank you very much, huh? However, just as the villain tried to dart off, using both speed and stealth to vanish unnoticed, something shoved him back at the last second, making him stumble and land on his butt. He quickly scrambled up again, narrowing his eyes at the air in front of him. What the heck was that? He took another step forward. Only to be pushed back again. KGH. This time, he caught himself before falling, glaring at the path that should have been his clean getaway with disbelief. What the hell? He muttered, scanning the open space in front of him like it had just betrayed him. It felt like gravity itself was changing directions just to not let him pass. His gaze suddenly snapped to Force Kick. Was this his doing? No. His quirk doesn't work like that. And he's still distracted by, wait. His eyes locked onto the figure in black. Still up there. Still playing a song like this was none of his business. And in that moment, when their eyes met, he saw it. Contempt. The guy was looking at him with contempt. It's you. He snarled. The culprit was the guy in black. Without thinking twice, he shot his tongue toward the rooftop, intent on teaching this random a lesson. Dynamic kick. Bam. Sadly, before it could reach, a powerful blow slammed into his side. He tumbled across the street, rolling like a kicked can, before catching himself mid-spin and landing on all fours. Furious, he turned to his attacker. You fucker. Force Kick. Apparently, the moment the villain had tried to lash out at the masked guitarist, Force Kick had finally snapped out of his confusion, and launched a high-powered kick to his ribs. He had planned on using the guitarist as a distraction, but ended up being distracted himself. Damn it, the villain cursed, glancing up at the rooftop again. He wanted to attack him, but with the hero meddling, it didn't seem like he could for now. Still, it seemed the guy in black didn't plan to interfere beyond stopping his escape. Otherwise, he'd have done more already. For now, he just kept playing, watching them with cold eyes from above, like he wanted them to fight, all while playing his music. Using them as entertainment. Sick bastard. Unfortunately, as much as he didn't like it, with Force Kick meddling he didn't have much option but to fight as the masked guy wanted. Force Kick seemed to come to a similar conclusion. Annoying as this interruption was, whatever law this fell under, the real threat was still in front of him. So, he had to focus on that first. As for the guy with the guitar, I'll deal with him later. The two thought the same thing, unknowingly in sync. And with that, the fight resumed. Only now, with a sick soundtrack on the back. Blow after blow, hero and villain clashed without pause. Sometimes, force kick landed devastating kicks, sending his opponent flying down the street, only for him to spring back to his feet like nothing happened. Other times, the chameleon villain caught force kick by the ankle with his tongue, spinning him like a ragdoll before hurling him across the intersection, only for the hero to stabilize midair with a burst of energy and shoot back in like a missile. Meanwhile, someone else was banking on this whole fight. Ha 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 ha, yes, yes, let it rain. Less than plus 13 aura greater than. Less than plus 15 aura greater than. Less than plus 11 aura greater than. Less than plus 14 aura greater than. Less than plus 9 aura greater than. Taka was grinning like an idiot behind his face mask as he continued playing, soaking in the beautiful sound of system notifications popping up erratically every once in a while through the song. This had been a genius idea. He'd already collected around 60 auras since the start of the song, and there were still 2 minutes left. If it kept up like this, he'd earn a full 100 points in a single day. A massive ASS gain. And all thanks to a piece of music pulled straight from his past life's memories. Thankfully, just before he got permanently KO'd by that banana, he'd been watching that obscure Devil May Cry anime from the 2000s. This song had made it onto his playlist, so it was still relatively fresh in his head. Well, most of it. There were a few parts he'd had to make up during the past month or so since he couldn't recall them, but it had turned out pretty damn good regardless. His technique was still that of a total noob, though. The only reason this concert was going well was because the song was unknown, so people couldn't really tell when he missed notes or completely butchered a section. Plus, it was the only song he'd practiced since picking up the guitar. It made sense that he could play it decently. If he tried anything else, he'd probably suck 3 times as much. But hey, it was doing its job. Less than plus 5 aura greater than. Less than plus 7 aura greater than. Less than plus 7 aura greater than. Taka's playing sped up in response to the notifications, a wide grin spreading under his mask. Though his expression twitched slightly when he noticed the numbers were starting to dip. The gains are diminishing a bit. Guess the surprise factor can only carry me so far. His eyes flicked toward the 2 still going at it in the street below. That reminded him, he had another problem he hadn't quite figured out yet. What the hell was he gonna do when the fight ended? Just casually walk away? Yeah, no, he had the feeling it wouldn't be that easy. The last thing he needed was to get arrested for interfering with a public arrest or some other nonsense. That would wipe all his aura. Then again, maybe if he played it right, he could spin this into some kind of mysterious bad boy vigilante with a sick riff image. Surely someone out there would get flustered and toss him a few bonus aura points. Still, jail time wasn't exactly a good look when you were aiming to get into UA. That might leave a mark on my file, he mused, discarding the idea right away. As Taka mulled it over, or as much as he could, given half his brain was focused on not screwing up the guitar, he eventually just shrugged. That's future Taka's problem. Right now, he had to focus. The climax of the song was approaching fast. And just like the song, the battle down below was also reaching its peak. Bang! Galactic kick. Force kick slammed his boot right into the chameleon villain's face, releasing a burst of energy that blasted the villain backwards. Crash. The impact launched him several meters, straight into the side of a nearby building, shattering glass as he crashed through a window. Huff. With his opponent seemingly down and his foot having a bit of smoke coming out of his soul, Force kick heaved a weary sigh. This fight had left him utterly drained. Who would have guessed that someone with a chameleon quirk could fight that well? But that last kick, it had to be enough, right? It was his strongest move. Whip. What? His thoughts were cut short as, suddenly, a tongue lashed out from the broken window where the villain had crashed, shooting toward him like a bullet. Tired and worn out, the hero had no chance to dodge. In the blink of an eye, his wrist was caught. There was a moment of eerie stillness as he glanced at it, then, the realization hit him. Oh no. And then, the tongue pulled. Arg. Bam. Crack. Slam. Crash. Force kick was flung like a ragdoll. He crashed against cars, bounced off buildings, got dragged along the asphalt and smashed through the ground like a plaything at the mercy of that unnaturally powerful tongue. Then, just when it looked like he couldn't take any more, the tongue snapped upward one final time, launching him high into the air before letting go. Up he soared, like a beautiful bird. Then, gravity kicked in. He began falling helplessly, his eyes rolling back. As he plummeted, the villain leapt out of the ruined building on all fours like a beast, quickly beginning to gather momentum as he dashed towards the falling hero with an enraged face. And just as Force Kick was about to hit the ground. Bam! The chameleon tackled Force Kick mid-air like a meteor, slamming into him with terrifying speed. Crash! The hero's limp body was sent hurtling into another building, piercing through another window and ending up stuck halfway in, his legs dangling limply outside. He didn't move. He was out. Ha, 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 that's what you get, the chameleon villain panted, grinning triumphantly as victory washed over him. The crowd was stunned. They had expected the hero to win. That's how it always went. And yet, now their hero lay limply on a shattered window, unmoving and unresponsive. He was knocked out cold. Dozens of wide, fearful eyes locked onto the villain, who glanced back at them with a chilling expression. I'd kill all of you right here, but I guess you're safe this time. As much as he wanted to take out his rage on these onlookers, the same people who had just cheered his beatdown moments ago, he couldn't afford to stick around. Another hero could show up any second. And this time, he was spent and barely had any strength left in him. So, without wasting another breath, he dropped to all fours and began to run, preparing to make his grand escape. Gah! Only to end up letting out a surprised cry as he was once again thrown backwards by a mysterious force. KGH, what? Catching himself, his eyes widened, the masked guy was still blocking his way. Angrily, he turned to the figure in black above. That's when he noticed it. Exclamation mark quote. The song was still not over. The guy in black hadn't stopped playing, even when the hero lost. And he had stopped him from leaving yet again. That meant. The chameleon's eyes burned red with fury as his teeth clenched. This freak was still treating him like part of the show. Still making him look like a fool. He was planning to keep him here until the song ended. Was he gonna fight him next, so the show didn't end like that? Or was he planning on keeping him here until reinforcements came? Whatever the answer was, he wasn't going to sit and take it. If he thought he'd be an easy opponent, then he was gonna show this fool who he was messing with. His tongue curled in preparation, tension building like a spring. If you won't let me leave, then don't blame me for what's about to happen to you. And with those words, the tongue shot out like a bullet. Watch out! Someone yelled from the crowd, worried as even when being attacked, the figure in black continued playing the song unbothered. Fortunately, their worries were unfounded, as the next second. Nani! The villain's eyes widened. His tongue stopped mid-air, like it had been stuck on something invisible. He immediately tried pulling it back, using all his strength, yet, it refused to move. Whatever was grabbing it was stronger than him and his tongue. This can't be. Back to Taka, he heaved a sigh as he watched everything unfold. I didn't expect that Herp to lose so suddenly. I didn't even have the time to cushion that last hit he took. He glanced with pity at the still fallen hero not too far away, before turning back to the villain, his troubled face slowly turning into a grin. Still, it's not all that bad. The fight ended before the song's final part, so I was worried it'd look a bit stupid for me to continue playing with nothing going on in front. His fingers picked up speed, finally entering the last part of the song. But it seems I got myself the entertainment I wanted. A twisted grin appeared on his face, hidden by the mask. With those thoughts, the song intensified, and at the same time, the villain's tongue began being pulled. Time for the grand finale. Arg. Just like the hero had been earlier, the villain was swung around without mercy, using his tongue as the focal point of the swing. Crash. Bang. Thud. Slam. A building, a car, the street, even the nearby trees. Taka didn't hold back in the slightest, slamming the villain against anything in view. His AP was now nearing 500 points, basically enough strength to lift two really heavy men. So tossing this chameleon guy around was no problem for him, if anything, it was trivially easy. And as he focused on thoroughly beating the guy, he also made sure to play the final part of the song as best as he could, pouring in every drop of sweat he had spent the past month practicing for this one moment. And that showed. His concentration reached its peak. The poor chameleon was now being swung to the rhythm of the song, drawing every onlooker into the melody again, hypnotized by the strange harmony of violence and music. And they weren't the only ones. For a brief moment, Taka immersed himself fully in the show, fusing both the beating and the song into a single, seamless act. There was no longer a distinction between them. The villain was no longer an enemy, but more like an unwilling orchestral conductor, dictating the tempo of the piece, by being flung around. Then, as the guitar's chords sped up, the melody began to signal that the end was near, just like the villain's fate. The notes grew sharper. The melody built tension, all leading up to the grand finale. As the music reached its most intense moment, the villain was sent flying, just like the hero had been earlier. And, with the final note, Chan, he was slammed into the ground, cracking the asphalt beneath him. His downfall timed perfectly with the song's ending, a single powerful guitar chord cutting through the air. Then silence. The crowd stood frozen, staring in awe as both the impromptu concert and battle reached their dramatic end. Less than +50 aura greater than. That's when a final burst of aura followed, generated from the awe of seeing a villain, one who had overwhelmed a hero, defeated with such bizarre flair. And with that, this entire thing was done. Taka heaved a satisfied sigh and eyed his gains. 158 aura, all in just a few minutes. He almost let out a loud laugh out of disbelief at his insane gains, when something even more surprising popped up. Completed. Now that you're capable of holding your ground, barely, it's time to focus on other aspects of the perfect aura farmer. Not all in life is fighting, so be sure to sharpen your other skills so you're not only a one-trick pony. Aura farming is present in all actions. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle practice a type of art for a month. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle dominate the basis of said art. Check mark. Less than calculating reward, greater than. Less than plus 150 aura. Greater than. Less than plus skill connoisseur greater than. Less than note. While your performance during practice and learning of the guitar was average at best, that last stunt you pulled by shamelessly butting into a fight between hero-villain for sake clout-worthy master aura farmer. Due to that, gains in aura this mission have been greatly boosted. Less than strong greater than. Remember, aura favors the brave. Greater than. Ha. If it weren't because he didn't want to lose aura by looking like a lunatic, Taka might have burst out laughing maniacally right then and there. A gain of 298 aura points in one day. He had almost doubled his aura since the morning. He hurriedly opened his status screen. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 66. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 132. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 430. Total aura, 430 right pointing arrow 728. Skills. Filled right pointing small triangle clean. Filled right pointing small triangle trouble radar. Filled right pointing small triangle connoisseur new. Nice. He eyed the new numbers with delight, then his attention shifted to the new skill, and he quickly opened its description. Connoisseur passive. Description. Since you've already shown others that you can be capable in this area too, it's only natural that your talent and skill are not merely average. You've got to show the whole world that you shine in more than one way, for you are the shiniest gem of all. Filled right pointing small triangle increases your learning capabilities and talent in all types of art. Filled right pointing small triangle augments your creative thinking. Filled right pointing small triangle increases chances of entering a state of absorption on the type of art you're doing. Huh. Yet another skill that didn't exactly make him jump in excitement, but definitely didn't look bad either. Especially because he had now seen how good aura farming through art could be. If he improved further, then there was no telling how much he'd be able to gain in the future. Plus, his goal of getting famous online might now be even more feasible. This day just gets better and better. As Taka was admiring his gains with a satisfied face, the sound of police sirens approaching startled him. Oh shit. Without hesitating, he enveloped his instruments in aura and began making them float. Then, with all the aura he could spare, he boosted his physical stat and made a run for it. He wasn't about to get caught. Of course, he first made sure to do a bow to the still-watching crowd before dipping out of there. Less than plus 10 aura greater than. Nice. Comma. To be continued. How was it? I'd have liked the chapter to progress along the song, but it ended up a bit too long. Either way, I think it did its job. 13 comments 0 vote. Step into fame. The next day. Comma. Inside a room filled with all sorts of music-themed decorations, including a few guitars and a drum set, a certain black-haired girl with earlobes strangely resembling earphone jacks sat at her desk, yawning lazily as she closed her notebook. That's enough studying for now. My brain's gonna fry. Tossing the notebook onto her bed without looking, she picked up her laptop and plugged it in. The device let out a small chime before coming to life. For the next few minutes, the girl stared at the screen with a bored expression, scrolling through random videos online. Sometimes she darted to other pages to check various things before returning for more doomscrolling. That was, until she came across it. What's that guy doing? The video began with someone filming themselves, their face twisted in shock, before they turned the phone around and tried to capture the bizarre scene unfolding in front of them, despite the shaky camera and poor video quality. But from what the girl could make out, it seemed that, just above the typical skirmish between a hero and a villain, some weirdo was sitting on top of a building with a guitar. That caught her attention. Was he about to Chaka-chan? The thunderous sound of the electric guitar confirmed her suspicion. He's actually going to play at a place like that. A slight smile crept onto her face. The sheer boldness of using a hero-villain battle as a stage for your own performance was pretty impressive, she had to admit. But would he actually be good enough to make it worth it? She leaned back in her seat, arms crossed, giving the video a smirk and an expectant look. He had the guts, now all that was left was to see if he had the skills. After that, she proceeded to binge nearly 3 minutes of the 4-minute video. It's good, she thought, sweat dropping slightly. The song was actually good. And after a while, the hero and the villain resumed their fight, which only made the song sync better with the action below. But, it sounds like it's incomplete, she muttered, squinting and leaning in closer. For some reason, it felt like a song meant to support other instruments. But since the guy was doing a solo, that was probably why it felt that way. Still, she couldn't help but wonder, how would it sound completed? The video went on. It was about 4 minutes long, so she figured there was just a minute left before the song ended, or before the guy got interrupted. Either way, she kept watching, wanting to see the performance to the end. But then something happened that pulled her attention away from the music. The villain won. About 30 seconds from the end, the hero received a devastating blow and was knocked out cold. The sight sent a chill down her spine. Like many others, she wasn't used to seeing heroes lose. Justice was supposed to always win. So what now? With the hero down and no reinforcements in sight, the villain was free to do whatever he pleased. What would happen to the people? Hold on. That's when she noticed, the music hadn't stopped. The guy on top of the building was still playing like nothing had happened. Did he not see the chaos going down there? Was he blind? If he kept playing. Sure enough, after a strange stumble, the villain turned his attention to the guitarist, lashing out his tongue at him, while the masked guy just kept playing. Her pupils shrank. What was he doing? He had to dodge. The one recording was just as shocked. People watching from afar seemed to panic, too. Watch out. Someone even tried to warn him. But the masked guy didn't flinch, entranced by his own performance, even as the villain's attack closed in. However, just when it looked like things were about to end horribly, the result was the exact opposite. The villain's tongue was suddenly caught mid-air by an invisible force, making her and the crowd gasp. That's when it hit everyone. From that point on, it wasn't a battle anymore, but a beating. Soon, the chameleon-like villain was being swung around like a rag doll, all to the rhythm of the song. A full minute of relentless chaos played out as the music reached its climax. The villain was slammed into buildings, cars, the ground. It was a bit pitiful. And then, the finale arrived. The song ended with one final, powerful note, and so did the fight. The villain was slammed into the ground with one last mighty swing. Chan. Bam. Vexingly, that's where the video ended, snapping the girl out of her daze. She bit her lip in frustration. What's with that ending? What happened after that? Annoyed, she dove into the comments. Most were rambling about the music, the guy's quirk, or arguing about whether interfering in a hero fight was illegal, none of which she cared about. Until finally, she saw something that mattered. I found his channel. He made one after the incident where he's uploading his videos. She opened the link without hesitation, and sure enough, there it was, a channel full of videos apparently from the same guy. Allegedly. He was wearing a dark hoodie and a black mask, so it was hard to be sure. But it seemed like him. She dove into one of the videos, and sure enough, he was playing the same song from the original clip. However, she was quick to notice a difference. For some reason, he seemed more skilled with the guitar than before. Not only that, but the song itself had changed slightly, it felt more polished, more refined. Still lacking other instruments, sure, but closer to completion than it was in the video she had just watched. The channel was fairly new, so there weren't that many videos uploaded yet. But without much thought, she went straight to the follow button. I wonder what weird thing this guy's gonna do next. Comma. Degree. 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 Dot dot dot. I wonder what I'm gonna do next. Taka muttered as he stared blankly at the ceiling of his room. A day had passed since his crazy stunt with the chameleon guy, and it had definitely been worth the risk. His aura had shot up from around 400 to 700. A gain of nearly 300 aura. He'd also gotten a new skill, and while it didn't boost his power directly, it definitely helped with farming aura online. But that was not all. Yesterday, he ended up with 738 points. Today, 744. And how? Less than +1 aura greater than. Exactly like that. The count had just gone up to 744 now. These kinds of notifications had been popping up every so often since yesterday, probably because people at the scene had recorded and uploaded footage of his mini concert. Add to that the new channel he created, using his masked persona as the face, and sure enough, it worked. Aura began falling from the sky like the system had said. In small droplets, spaced hours apart, but it was falling from the sky nonetheless. It might seem like a tiny amount, but 5 points a day would mean 150 by the end of the month. And with 10 months left before he applied to UA, that could mean 1,500 aura gained passively by then. Of course, that was assuming people didn't forget about him in a week. Which, they probably would. So he had to come up with something new before his 15 minutes of fame were up. But what would it be? Ideally, something that wouldn't put him on the police's radar. So far, it didn't seem like he was wanted for anything, probably because he hadn't really interfered with the fight until the villain had already won and directly attacked him. Still, he had a feeling he was already walking on thin ice, and that if he pulled another public stunt, the police might come knocking on his door. Then again, playing the badass antihero vigilante could earn him a ton of aura. But for now, he preferred to avoid that path. His eyes drifted to the guitar leaning against the wall. I could always try uploading new songs, he thought, grabbing his chin. It may have been hard for the me from 2 days ago, but with the connoisseur skill now, it won't be half as bad. His gaze shifted to his PC. I've also already racked up a decent number of subscribers. 3,000, not massive, but definitely something. Way better than my old channel ever managed. If I upload more songs, I could probably milk some decent aura from them. Yeah, that seemed like a solid plan. But, I need more power. He couldn't just coast on music videos for the rest of the year. There was still a huge power gap waiting to be made between him and the crybaby protagonist. When UA's exam arrived, he needed to have absolute power. Thus, he needed tons of aura and more skills too. And that meant heading out, risking his hide, and grinding like hell. The online aura farming would just be supplementary. If he wanted the good gains, he'd have to crash a few more hero-villain fights over the course of the year. Comma. But that could wait. Just a little. I don't want to end up a hunted vigilante or something. Comma. To be continued. Here it is, folks. The extra chapter for reaching the 100 stones. Don't ask for more, as I don't have that many chapters stashed. I'm a rather slow writer. 24 comments 0 vote. The beating. LL. A month later. Comma. Sip. Ha. Life sure is great. Less than +1 aura greater than. Ha ha ha. There goes another one. Taka lounged on a beach chair in his garden, sipping a cool lemonade while shades shielded his eyes from the harsh UV rays, truly embodying the image of success. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and opened YouTube, scrolling through a saved list of videos, all of them featuring him crashing villain and hero battles, putting on his usual performance in the middle of the action. Opening one, he watched it from start to finish, a small smirk tugging at his lips. When it ended, his gaze fell on the text below. He squinted, pleased. Views. 80,000. With a satisfied sigh, he turned off his phone and slid it back into his pocket, running a hand through his hair. It truly seems have ascended to stardom. Less than +1 aura greater than. Ha 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 ha. Let it rain, let it rain. Another notification popped up. He laughed aloud, raising his lemonade in celebration and spilling a bit without caring. It wasn't quite at the level of being called rain yet, but his passive aura income had increased noticeably compared to a month ago, back when he first performed his stunt at Force Kick's battle with the chameleon villain. The boost was thanks to everything else he'd been doing in the past month. After his initial success, he had decided to reuse the same formula. The arrest of a gang, dangerous villains on the run, petty thieves. Taka took advantage of every heroic incident nearby to set up impromptu concerts, playing the same DMC song every time. Mostly because he hadn't had the time to learn another one. Recomposing songs from memory was a nightmare, even with his enhanced talent. He hadn't been deeply involved in music in his past life beyond being a listener, so no, he didn't magically remember a music sheet for every song he knew, nor could he recreate them perfectly with some photographic memory he didn't have. Still, it wasn't impossible. With effort, and thanks to his new skill, he had been working on recreating another song from his old world. Sometimes it didn't sound exactly like the original, but those flaws were easy enough to fix with time. Once perfected, he could either upload it or, better yet, save it for another hero vs villain event to ride the wave of action and fame again, boosting both his aura and passive income, which, by the way, had doubled. From around 5 per day to roughly 10. That meant about 2,700 aura by the end of the remaining 9 months. He, Taka chuckled, smirking at the math. Why was I so worried about being left behind? At this rate, I'll be invincible by the time UA's exam arrives. With a satisfied grin, he opened his status window, ready to bask in the results of his month-long grind. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 75. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 150. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 1104. Total aura, 1104. Skills. Filled right pointing small triangle clean. Filled right pointing small triangle trouble radar. Filled right pointing small triangle connoisseur. Nearly 400 aura gained in a month. It was the combined result of his passive income and his stunts, though none had matched the ridiculous gains of his first big performance, they still brought in plenty. Satisfied with the numbers and his bright prospects, he stood up, stretched, and headed inside, planning to go straight to his room. He needed to practice the new song so that when the next opportunity arose, he could give his best performance yet, and cash in as much aura as possible. Sounds like a plan, he muttered as he walked, a sly grin creeping onto his otherwise dull face. Shaw. However, just as he slid the glass window open to step inside the house, a figure blocked his path. Taka raised an eyebrow, recognizing the person in front of him, and deadpanned. It was Seiji, who returned Taka's deadpan with one of his own. Hey, kid, shouldn't you be heading to school right now? Ha. Oh, right, tisk. Taka clicked his tongue as the realization hit him. He'd been so engrossed in admiring his gains that he'd completely forgotten there was school today. With a heavy sigh, he shook his head in lament. I guess I'm still not famous enough to skip school. Comma. Degree. Hours later. Comma. Taka leaned on his palm, boredom written all over his face as his teacher droned on with the lesson. A yawn escaped him for what must have been the 10th time, making his feelings on the class crystal clear. Ring. The second the bell rang, his posture shifted instantly. In one smooth motion, he stood up, gathered his things, and made for the exit, obviously unwilling to spend a second longer here than necessary. His teacher shot him a baffled look. Couldn't the kid at least pretend to care about his feelings? But in the end, he let it go. It wasn't like Taka was doing badly in class anyway. So, with no one to stop him, Taka left the classroom, his bag slung casually over one shoulder. He headed for the lockers to swap his shoes and grab the rest of his things before heading home. After a brief stop to change, he finally stepped out of the school building, a faint smile forming as he looked at the setting sun in the distance. But just as he was about to cross through the school gates into the outside world, a hand clamped down on his shoulder. Hey, we wanted to have a little chat with you. Taka turned his head, and his eyebrow twitched faintly when he saw who it was. A trio of thugs with ridiculous hairstyles. He knew them well. They were infamous around here, high-ranking members of a gang of delinquents that had sprung up between this school and several others nearby. Teenagers with superpowers tended to go on massive ego trips in this era. Of course, when actual heroes stepped in, their bravado tended to vanish. Sadly, no hero had stepped in for this gang yet. They hadn't caused enough trouble to warrant official attention, which explained why Taka was in this situation. The group from his class that had tried to mess with him months ago had been part of this gang. After he'd casually swung them around like ragdolls, he'd basically put a target on his back. Not that he cared. His current stats were enough to take on small-time villains, so a few delusional teenagers didn't exactly worry him. Besides, if someone sees me beating them up, I might gain some aura, sure, why not? Suppressing the grin tugging at his lips, Taka gave a simple nod, not uttering a single word. The trio blinked, clearly not expecting him to accept so easily. Still, they shrugged it off with a snort and motioned for him to follow, which Taka did gladly. They led him to a secluded spot behind the school where no one ever went. With no one around to interrupt, they shoved him against a wall and closed in with smug expressions. Oi, I heard you roughed up our juniors pretty bad a while ago. We can't just let that slide, can we? Yeah, haven't you heard of us, the Apocalypse Gang? Or did you just not care about the consequences of provoking us? I believe he thinks he's better than us, we ought to teach him his place, brothers. Agreed. Taka gave them a calm gaze, holding back a mocking sneer from escaping his nose as he heard their supposedly intimidating chat. I'll make sure to put you three to good use, maybe I'll even make you do acrobatics in the air, that'll yield some aura for sure, given that someone's watching, of course. His eyes darted around, looking for anyone peeking or similar. Unfortunately, they seemed to be truly alone. Well, whatever. I guess you can't always gain aura. Taka sighed, shaking his head helplessly. I suppose I'll deal with this quickly then. However, just as the trio was about to get on the move, and Taka was about to do so as well, a window popped up on Taka's peripheral vision. Seeing someone beat up their opponents with overwhelming power is amazing, but you know what is even more jaw-dropping? Having someone tank their attacks unaffected, until they make them realize the difference between powers. Show these punks that they're not even at the level of making you lift a finger. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle take all their hits without fighting back, and don't wince, groan, or curse. Filled right pointing small triangle do not enhance your defense to reduce the damage. Filled right pointing small triangle do so until they give up or the beating stops. Reward. Plus 100 aura gain the skills pain is just a feeling, and immovable object gain a mysterious reward. Note. Host may be exempted from continuing with the mission if the conflict escalates to causing potentially dangerous injuries. Huh. Taka eyed the screen with wide eyes. You've got to be kidding me. Bam. A sucker punch connected right with his face the instant that thought went through his mind. His face was thrown back, saliva coming out of his mouth, and he stumbled a bit backwards, his back hitting the wall where he had been encircled earlier. Seeing the attack connect, the two at the back snickered, glancing between their companion who had swung and the struck Taka with an amused face. Their joyful faces froze the next second. Just an instant after being struck, Taka's face turned back to face them, eyes squinted in evident anger, and a trail of saliva on his mouth from the punch. Without turning his defiant gaze away, Taka swept the saliva off. Seeing no fear or hesitation in those eyes, the one who had struck grinned savagely, preparing another punch. Oh, so you're feeling brave. And then, he swung again. Bam! The fist connected right with Taka's solar plexus, bending Taka in half for a few seconds. However, despite the strike, not a sound escaped him. He went as far as biting his inner cheek to hold the groan from leaving. Shaky and in undeniable pain, Taka still forced himself up, meeting eyes with the main punk who had been punching him so far. Whack! Right away, another fist hit his face, snapping it to the side, along with his body, making him almost stumble. And yet, Taka stood back up again, his eyes never leaving the three teenagers. This time, the amused gaze from the main guy faltered a bit, and even his two goons behind him looked a bit confused. What's with you? Are you masochistic or something? Taka snorted and lifted both, beckoning them to come at him by smugly waving his hands. The three didn't leave him hanging. Soon, the main punk threw a kick and folded Taka in half, this time throwing him to the ground. Following that, the other two dashed to beat him up while he lay on the ground. Soon enough, Taka began receiving many kicks while down. His body is curling a bit due to the pain. These fuckers. Taka gritted his teeth as he felt several kicks connect with his body. I could beat them up so easily, and yet I'm here pathetically receiving kicks on the dirt, how is this aura farming? As Taka questioned the veracity of the mission from the supposed aura farming system, the kicks suddenly stopped. His eyes opened for a moment in confusion. What had happened? But then, he felt one of the guys pull his clothes and him along with them up, before slamming him against the wall, almost making him let out a groan out of instinct. He held it in, somehow. As Taka caught his breath, the main punk glanced at him with disdain, smirking at Taka's sorry visage. We had considered inviting you to join our gang, considering you were capable of beating our juniors alone, but what's this? You're so pathetic, not doing anything despite us beating you up. Taka didn't say anything. Bam. Quote dot 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 exclamation mark quote. But then, he almost let out the best profanity he knew as he felt a fist sink right in his stomach, taking him by surprise. That's when pain and frustration piled up. That's it, I'm tearing you fuckers down. Mission or not, I'm turning you bunch into meat powder today. Taka's eyes widened from the anger, and he lifted his hand, preparing to begin the beating. The aura began moving, wrapping around the trio, who looked oblivious to their approaching fates. But just as Taka was about to move, he stopped, his hand falling, and his eyes closing depotently for a moment, before opening back again. Slap. Suddenly, he slapped away the guy's hand gripping his shirt and took a step forward, coming face to face with him. The sudden action took the three by surprise. They prepared, thinking he was about to use his quirk. But instead, hit me. Huh. Taka pointed at himself. I said, hit me. The trio looked at each other before turning back to Taka. Well, if you say so. With no hesitation, one of them threw a punch directly at Taka's face. Whack. This time, blood was drawn, having been hit enough to tear his lip. But just a second later, Taka turned to face the guy who had punched him again, taking another step forward, and meeting his gaze just a few centimeters away. Hit me. Why you? The guy stepped back, startled by the sudden, non-hesitant attitude of what was supposed to be their victim, but Taka followed after him. Come on, hit me. The runt threw another punch. Whack. It hit Taka, but it barely moved his head before he turned back with the same unshaken gaze. Come on, hit me, you fuck. Isn't that why you're here? If it's a beating you want so much, take it. Then another of the guys joined in, punching his face again from the side. But unlike before, Taka's head didn't move, his cheek sank from the impact, but that was all. Slowly, he turned to face the newly joined participant. His beyond angry, murderous eyes locked with the startled punks. I told you to hit me. Is that all you lame fucks can do? The trio looked at each other, clearly baffled by Taka's attitude. From his gaze alone, they could tell he wanted nothing more than to tear them apart, and yet, he was asking them to hit him more. They hesitated. Something was clearly wrong with the guy in front of them. But could they call themselves proper delinquents if they backed down just because some guy was messed up in the head? Let's see if you like this then. Yeah, you fucker. See if this is enough for you. Soon, punches began raining on Taka, who folded a bit under the storm of strikes. But even then, no sound came out of him. He simply closed his eyes tightly throughout the whole beating. All, until the three became tired. Damn, why is he still on his feet? Didn't they say his quirk was some telekinetic shit? How does that equal taking a beating this long? My hand hurts already. Should we use our quirks? This guy doesn't look like he is going down anytime soon otherwise. The three took a few steps back when they saw Taka still standing tall, despite the bruises on his face. A wave of hesitation passed between them as they faced the still unwavering eyes of their opponent. Eventually, one decided to give up. Tisk. This is getting boring, hey, let's dip out of here. But just as he was about to propose leaving, a voice called out to them. Hey, you three, what the hell do you think you're doing? A girl came running at them angrily. The group turned to look at her, Taka included, baffled. She had short black hair and two long earlobes resembling earphone jacks. For a moment, Taka felt a faint familiarity with her appearance, but given the current situation, he didn't pay it any mind for now. As the girl arrived in front of them, she placed herself between Taka and the group, almost like trying to shield the aura farmer. Enough of beating him up, can't you see he's not even defending himself? The trio's sweat dropped. I mean, he was kinda asking for it. We were just leaving anyway. Move aside. Hey. The trio froze when they saw Taka push the girl aside and step forward. For a moment, they thought he'd ask for more like earlier, but then, they all felt a chill when they saw his wicked smile. If you stopped hitting me, then I'll assume you're done with your turn. In the corner of Taka's vision, a certain screen could be seen. Seeing someone beat up their opponents with overwhelming power is amazing, but you know what is even more jaw-dropping? Having someone tank their attacks unaffected, until they make them realize the difference between powers. Show these punks that they're not even at the level of making you lift a finger. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle take all their hits without fighting back, and don't wince, groan, or curse. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle do not enhance your defense to reduce the damage. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle do so until they give up or the beating stops. Check mark. Less than calculating reward, greater than. Less than plus 100 aura greater than. Less than plus skill. Less than m greater than pain is just a feeling greater than. Less than plus skill. Less than m greater than immovable object greater than. Less than plus mysterious reward. Less than m greater than harness of perfection greater than. Less than note. You took that beating like a champ, host. Greater than. If Taka had already been feeling angry, the system note at the end certainly didn't help. Right now, he didn't know if he'd be able to continue on the path of heroism, or if he'd have to live a life on the run from now on, charged with triple homicide. But he didn't care. Right now, he'd return the beating he took, tenfold. Comma. Degree. 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 Minutes later. Comma. Taka let out a satisfied sigh as he admired his work of art. The three punks, who'd been so cocky earlier, now hung beaten and humiliated, swollen eyes, bruises everywhere, broken noses, and dangling from a school flagpole by their underwear. The old but classic wedgie never failed when it came to humiliation. He could have left them naked for everyone to see, but the girl was still there. He decided to spare her the view. Besides, after the beating he'd given them, he was already feeling plenty satisfied. Although when the pain from his own earlier beating flared up again, the thought of doing it regardless was tempting. In the end, though, and for the sake of maintaining his facade, he held back. The matter was over. With the annoying mission finally complete, and the strong urge to just collapse into bed, he turned to head straight home. Hey, you're not just gonna leave like that, are you? Never mind. Taka turned to the girl, deadpanning. Honestly, he wasn't in the mood for conversation, not with his body aching all over, so. What? He cut straight to the point. The girl's sweat dropped at his bluntness but spoke up anyway. Well, if you could have done that from the start, why didn't you? I thought you were about to die or something. Taka stayed silent for a moment, trying to come up with an answer. He couldn't exactly say he was a slave to some system and couldn't resist the temptation of racking up aura and new skills. So he went with the quickest excuse that came to mind. I was making a point. The girl frowned. Huh, what point? A beat of silence passed before Taka replied. That they're not even worth defending myself against. With that, he turned and started walking away, leaving the girl glancing between his retreating figure and the knocked out trio. What's with that? To be continued. How was that? I didn't see much problem with how Taka handled it, but you are the readers, you tell me. Maybe it was too annoying to see him get beaten up. Hopefully not. 31 comments 0 vote. Masochistic system. Taka walked back home, limping a little, and his face betraying any intent to hide the pain in his body, not that the bruises and dirt all over him helped with that. He looked totally wrecked. As he walked, he let out a long sigh, one mixed with disappointment and disgust. I'm a fucking slave, to let myself get beaten up this much just for some aura and skills, what am I doing with my life? He stopped walking and glanced at the bruises on his arms with a scowl. I really should stop following blindly the system's missions. But then, his eyes darted to the screen, his annoyed gaze flickering just slightly. But well, I did get beaten up a lot for this, so let's see if it was really worth it or not. He tapped the air where the screen was and checked the 3 rewards he had gotten. 100 points of aura, making his total reach 1170. 2 new skills, which he planned to check out in a second. And lastly, a mysterious reward that turned out to be something called, Best of Perfection. An object-type reward, something he hadn't seen so far from the missions, rewards, and that he was especially thrilled to check out. But since he preferred to leave the most important things for last, he checked the skills first. Pain is just a feeling, passive. Description. Pain, like any other feeling, is essential to our own survival. Without it, we wouldn't even notice the damage to our bodies, nor the limits that we have. However, sometimes there are more important things than our body, and the need to transcend our suffering becomes essential. Never again shall you become a slave of pain, for pain is an alert, not a wall. Filled right pointing small triangle greatly enhances pain resistance. Note, pain resistance is not the same as pain negation. The pain you'll feel is the same, but how you respond to it is the key. No comment on that one, Taka deadpanned, another skill that didn't boost his combat power. Or maybe it does. Taka mused, grabbing his chin with a pensive face. If he ever was in too much danger, at least now he had the assurance he wouldn't get paralyzed from pain or something similar. Plus, now I can aura farm by being able to act like I can't feel pain, regardless of whether I might be crying my heart out inside. Taka nodded with his eyes closed as that thought crossed his mind. Once again, another skill focused on aura farming, maybe all skills will be like that. He blinked, then let out a wry laugh. Well, I suppose it's called aura farming system for a reason. His eyes turned to the next skill. And sure enough. Immovable object, active. Description. The enemy launches their best attack, one that shatters earth and ignites the air, and yet, as it strikes their foe, he stays there, unmoving, his body unaffected, and his gaze unwavering. All that power, all that energy, they were nothing before a man who was like a mountain. Filled right pointing small triangle grants your aura the ability to negate all knockback or recoil from an attack, making you unaffected by it, at least on the outside. Filled right pointing small triangle due to the energy behind attacks having to go somewhere, all the energy behind attacks will be redirected and distributed throughout your entire body. Note: the energy distribution takes into account the energy that is lost on the air, ground, and anywhere else, so you're more likely to take more damage while using this ability. Come on, man, Taka deadpanned at the utterly useless skill, if not for the aura farming use. Because that was all it was good for. It basically made him more vulnerable, in exchange for not being knocked back from attacks. I guess only the first skill had some real use, huh? He rubbed his temples, already feeling like getting beaten up hadn't been worth it at all. So, his attention went to the last reward on the list. Hopefully, it'd be what he needed for his mood to improve. Best of perfection item. Description. What is perfection, but an unattainable goal, for anyone but the true aura farmer, that is. Aura farming is not only present in battle, but the very reality that surrounds us. The way we breathe, the way we walk, the way we talk, the way we act as a whole. They all shape the true aura farmer, and differentiate them from a fake one. So, what path will you take? One of deception, or one of perfection? Hollow down pointing triangle. Do you want to take the item out? Yes, no. Quote. And what the hell is this? Taka eyed the item with a dumbfounded gaze. Whoever wrote that description had a knack for saying a lot but not really saying anything. So, still confused as heck about what the hell the item really was, Taka clicked on the yes, and soon after, a very simple vest dropped in front of him. Quote. Question mark quote. Taka picked it up with a deadpan. The thing looked lame. It was just a very plain vest made out of what looked like leather. But besides that, it had no design at all. But just as Taka was beginning to think he had been scammed and beaten up for nothing. So you've gotten a hold of the vest of perfection. Then better put it to good use and start right away with your evolution. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle put on the vest, and wear it for an entire week. Filled right pointing small triangle do not take it off until the end of the mission. Filled right pointing small triangle do not support your own body by using aura projection. Reward. +50 aura gain the skills, true walking, true breathing, and true speaking. Taka's eyes widened like plates the moment he saw the reward of 3 whole skills for completing a mere week-long mission. Though his awestruck expression disappeared pretty quickly once he gave the skills, names a look over. Talk about lame-sounding names. He squinted his eyes at the reward's description and then turned to glance at the vest in his hands hesitantly. Still, it's 3 skills for only a week. Compared to most missions so far, which have taken me a month each, a single week seems pretty simple. He inspected the vest from closer, looking at it with a suspicious gaze. But this system wouldn't just give me that many skills for such a simple job, so what's the catch with this thing then? Taka stood silent in the middle of the street, inspecting the seemingly normal-looking piece of leather for a few seconds, his eyes never losing the distrust in them. But ultimately, he shrugged it all off. Well, whatever. How bad can it be? And so, without much worry, he began putting on the vest. And then, nothing happened. He gave himself a look, raising an eyebrow. He looked ridiculous. Like some poorly made cowboy costume. Is that the challenge? To keep a straight face despite wearing this during an entire week? If that's it, then I think I can monog, you. Taka almost let out a strange cry the next second, not because of pain, but rather because. WWWHAWHATIIST, A huge pressure suddenly fell upon his throat. No, not only his throat, but on all the muscles that allowed him to speak. His mandible was heavy, and he barely felt able to let out air, even less able to control it to speak. What had been a simple task he'd been doing since he was a brat now felt like torture. But why? His eyes immediately shot to the vest. It's this thing's fault. Taka scowled, his hand gripping tightly his throat. But how? It's not even touching my neck, how is it even? Hold on. Taka's eyes widened as a thought reached him. And sure enough, soon he felt it. The true culprit behind everything had been his own aura. And what was worse, the aura was moving. The pressure that had only been difficulting him to speak soon began affecting other areas as well. Taka's eyes widened in horror as his own aura betrayed him and acted on its own. After the throat, the pressure fell on the lungs and all muscles responsible for allowing him to breathe. Suddenly, breathing felt like the most excruciating exercise ever. Every intake felt for his lungs like trying to take in solid rock instead of smooth air. Not only that, but muscles that helped with taking the air in, like his back and a bit of his abdomen, also felt incredibly tight. Much like talking, breathing had become almost impossible. But even then, the aura still wasn't done. Lastly, the pressure extended to his lower zone. No, not that lower zone, fortunately. His waist, legs, knees, heel, and even toes began suffering from a jarring pressure, along with the muscles that supported them. Eventually, his legs buckled, and he fell on his knees, unable to stand under the strain. But even on the floor, living wasn't easy. Ha, ha. His breathing was close to sounding like that of a dying person, both because he could barely let out a sound and because he barely had any air to produce a sound. It took most of his effort just to be able to intake enough air not to die, and yet, he still felt like he was asphyxiating. What the hell is with these missions? Taka's fist clenched as he glared at the floor like it was his worst enemy. First it was getting beat up without fighting back, now it's this shit. He tried to stand up, but his knees were barely able to push him up for a moment before he lost control of himself and fell to the floor either way. Thud. As his face hit the pavement, he let out a pained groan, or at least something akin to that. Aura farming system. Don't make me laugh, it's more like a masochistic system, I refuse to do this shit. With his patience at its limit, Taka reached for the vest, planning to take it off. A week. He could barely hold it together a minute after putting it on. But just as he was about to reach it. Hey, are you okay? Someone picked him up and lifted him, placing one of his arms over their shoulder for support. When he turned to look. It's you. Taka's eyebrows furrowed lightly, though the question that came out of his mouth sounded more like it came from a zombie than a person. There, supporting him with a complicated gaze, was the same girl from before. Taka gave her a confused look. Where had she even popped out from? I'd been worried you might have been acting tough and actually needed medical attention from the beating you got, so I came to check quickly on you, turns out I was right, huh? She gave him a funny look, though a faint worry was visible in her eyes. Taka shook his head, cold sweat dropping from his forehead. Then, he pointed a finger at himself. MMY quirk's side effect. The girl blinked, then let out a hiss, giving him a look over. What kind of horrible side effect leaves you like that? Quote. This one. She shot him a deadpan. That's not very helpful. Taka closed his eyes, eyebrows furrowing slightly. Quote. Don't need help. The girl stared at him in silence, then gave him a quick look from head to toe, only to raise an eyebrow, thoroughly unconvinced. Are you sure about that? Taka nodded, not wanting to bother trying to speak. The girl fell silent for a moment, seemingly in thought. In the end, she sighed. Can you stand on your own then? Taka simply nodded, though a faint uncertainty could be seen in his eyes. She noticed it, but decided to continue regardless. Then, I'm going to let you go, slowly. Another nod from Taka. Okay. She said, before slowly beginning to take his arm off her shoulder. As the weight of his body began falling on himself again, Taka's teeth gritted beyond measure. Brace for the pain, brace for the pain, brace for the pain. And sure enough, as his body became forced to sustain itself, all of his weight fell upon his legs. Taka's eyes widened, and he bit his lips. I'm a superior human being, a once in a trillion birth, even All Might sucks ass before me, he is my errand boy, and I'm a motherfucking GOOOOOOOOD. With strange thoughts giving him power, Taka pushed as much as he could, all to simply not buckle and fall. Soon, pain followed. Not sharp pain like he had a broken bone or something similar, but the kind of pain that comes from being on your limits. The kind of pain that is your body telling you to stop, or soon there'll be consequences. And sure enough, this wasn't an anime where willpower could do it all, so there would probably be consequences, alright. A torn muscle, or something similar. But as he felt himself between the decision of continuing and tearing something, or falling and losing aura in front of the newly arrived girl, Taka realized what the true answer was. Neither. Somehow, in a moment of clarity born from desperation, he found strength. Strength in muscles he hadn't noticed were there, or he hadn't noticed that they could be used for this. So, he pushed. And this time, he didn't fall. Soon, he stood upright, his stance tall, and his face, though sweating like crazy, was victorious. I win. Fresh air met his visage, and for a moment, he almost laughed, except he couldn't. Though a small smirk did appear on his face. Through relentless effort and a lot of pain, he had done it. He had stood. Quote. Meanwhile, the girl could only stare dumbfounded. Degree. Minutes later. Turns out, Taka still needed help walking. With the girl's help, they walked to a nearby park and sat down on a bench to rest. Taka's low, but rather noticeable, shallow breathing filled the silence between the two. After a bit of hearing it, the girl gave him a dubious gaze. Seriously, are you sure you don't need to go to the hospital? I'm sure. Look at that, he managed to say that clearly, despite the tightness around his throat. Maybe he was finally getting the hang of this. Taka felt triumphant at that small win. As for the girl's question, well, he felt like shit, but controlled shit, not impending death shit. So he probably didn't need to go there. Unless he tore a muscle or something. But if he was ever really about to reach that point, he could just take the vest off. Although, now that he thought about it, why hadn't he done so already? He had been about to do it, but then this girl appeared. Since then, he unconsciously forbade himself from taking it off. Like trying to prove something. Must be the aura farmer inside me, fucking hell, I already got brainwashed. As he cursed the system, sulking over his own weakness of mind, the girl gave him a curious look. Your quirk was something like telekinesis, right? You used it on those guys, but how the hell does it result in such a side effect? Taka didn't say anything. He couldn't come up with any excuse. Thankfully, his difficulty when breathing and talking was enough excuse not to say anything. Well, you don't need to speak. That was just me mulling it over. The girl smiled wryly and turned to look at the front. I just thought it had looked like a pretty powerful quirk. It's a shame it has such consequences. You might have even been able to postulate to UA. Taka continued with his haggard breathing, but gave her a look. Well, a little talk can't hurt. With his newfound mastery of forcing his voice out despite the struggle, Taka began talking. I'm going to. She gave him an incredulous look. Seriously. But this side effect. It's a one-time thing. She raised an eyebrow. A quirk that had a side effect, but it was something that happened only once. That sounded weird. Then, something clicked in her head. Like a caterpillar. Taka turned to her slowly, giving her a dumbfounded gaze. She quickly began explaining herself. You know, because of the evolving process when they get into a cocoon and become a butterfly. Is it something like that, or did I completely miss the mark? Taka raised an eyebrow at the clarification. He glanced to the front and thought, actually, that sounded fit. The vest was the cocoon, a rather painful one. And the butterfly would be the skills. Something like that. So I was right. Something like that. What's with that? The girl chuckled and soon held a hand in front of Taka, offering a handshake. Well, if you're going to UA, then we might be classmates next year since I'm going there too. I'm Kyoka Jiro, by the way. I forgot to introduce myself earlier, but you left too fast, so it wasn't all my fault. Taka took the hand, gathering some air and speaking. Takahashi Fukumoto, nice to meet you. And with that last introduction, another small silence settled between the two. This time, a little less awkward. During it, Taka leaned forward and closed his eyes, resting after such a lengthy conversation. He honestly felt like he had just run a marathon and couldn't even catch his breath since even doing that was hard. So he spent quite a few minutes resting. At least until his eyes suddenly snapped open. Hold on, Kyoka Jiro. Swish. Question mark. His head turned faster than a bullet to the girl, who was startled by the sudden look. Fuck, how did I even miss something like this when she has been next to me for over 30 minutes? Taka felt the need to slap his forehead, but he was too tired to do so, so he didn't. His eyes went directly to her earlobes, and sure enough, they looked like earphone jacks, the same ones the Kyoka Jiro from the anime had. Damn, I'm a dumbass. The girl, or rather, Jiro, picked up on his gaze rather quickly and furrowed her eyebrows faintly. What, haven't you seen a mutant-type quirk before? Realizing he might have come off as shocked by the long earlobes, Taka averted his gaze quickly. I just saw a cat. She deadpanned. On my ear. Something like that. The girl just stared at him, dumbfounded. But before she could say anything, Taka stood up with surprising speed. Anyway, I'm leaving. And with that, he took off. Somehow, he picked up on a similar trick to the one from when he tried to stand up, and did it. He walked. Using muscles he didn't know he had, controlling his balance more thoroughly to not put too much pressure on one leg, using every single centimeter of his leg, from his toe to his ass. It was like he had gotten enlightenment on how to properly walk despite his disability, all just to avoid having to come up with more excuses. And so, he began walking away, with difficulty, but he was walking. Jiro could only look at his departing back with a strange look. What a weird guy. To be continued. An important. Yo, there were a lot of people that didn't like the last chapter, and I don't blame you, I kinda predicted it'd be like that. So let me explain why I did it. First of all, you may have noticed that Taka isn't exactly the most admirable or cool person around. The point I wanted for the missions to accomplish, besides obviously letting him farm aura in front of others, is to build his character so that what he is doing now, acting and putting on a front to act cool, becomes second nature for him without even noticing. Hence, not all missions will be focused on showing off. Some will be about developing abilities or his mentality. In the case of the last chapter's mission, it was also Taka could grow in terms of grit. Have in mind his physique is mildly above average, as he began training not long ago, so the three punks' attacks weren't something he could just ignore. And yet, by the end of the mission, he began pushing against them, not backing up and even mocking them outright. While the process may have been unsightly, I personally think there was coolness in that. But for those of you who are still dissatisfied, a moment like that where he's put down by others won't repeat. Even that mission was something I came up with since I wanted something fitting for a skill that let him tank attacks without moving or flinching. There may be missions where he struggles or has to do something hard, like this new mission, but from now on, he'll aura farm even in those moments of struggle. He is becoming more and more of an aura farmer with each chapter, after all. So you don't need to worry about losing aura either, it was just a gag from the earlier chapters. He'd have to screw up badly for me to consider lowering his aura. Anyway, enough yapping, hope you liked the chapter. 41 comments 0 vote. Evolution. Sorry about the delay, I was out yesterday, so I couldn't upload the chapter. Consequently, accordingly, and henceforth, double chapter today. Evolution. Taka's classroom, a week later. Takahashi, come answer this question. Sigh. In response to his teacher's demand, Taka stood up with a sigh and calmly walked towards the board, snatching the chalk from the teacher's hand once he got close enough. Then, with it in his grasp, he quickly began scribbling the answer. Tack. The class and the teacher calmly watched him scribble all sorts of calculus on the board, a few eyebrows furrowing, while others raised in confusion. Once he was finally done, he returned the chalk to the teacher, who took it while glancing at the board with a slight squint of his eyes. Then, having done his job, Taka began walking back to his seat with both hands in his pockets. All while holding back a grin. Yet again, another problem flawlessly solved. His classmates must have been gawking at how effortlessly he had made it look. It's wrong. His teacher's voice interrupted Taka's thoughts. He stopped dead in his tracks and turned back to his teacher, keeping on the poker face. You sure? The teacher felt an eyebrow twitch. Of course I'm sure. You wrote x equals 9, yet the answer should be x equals 11. I wrote x equals 11. Don't screw with, The teacher blinked as he saw that, on the board, was indeed the correct answer. He glanced back at Taka, seeing the stoic student blink while staring blankly at the air, as if his head was somewhere else. He scratched the back of his head and let out a frustrated sigh, not sure how to interpret this. Is my sight getting bad or something? Can I go back to my seat now? Yeah, sure. With the dismissal, Taka left his teacher to question his eyesight alone and returned to his seat, ignoring the muffled giggles from his classmates around as he sat down. Unlike their teacher, who had been at an angle where he hadn't been able to see the board while he looked at Taka. They had seen clearly how a magical chalk suddenly began floating in the air and corrected the mistake in a flash. Their poor teacher had been played. Less than +5 or a greater than. Despite the sudden gain popping up at the corner of his vision, Taka's face remained expressionless. The only thing he did was close his eyes for a moment as if enjoying the sound of the notification, before opening them back again as if nothing had happened. After the teacher finally shook the matter of his vision off for a moment, the class continued from then on like normal. Questions flew towards other students, and other times, they were told by their teacher to read a certain part of the school textbook. Reading. Eventually, the school bell rang, declaring an end to classes. Without hesitation, Taka stood up, picked up his things, and walked out of the classroom. However, he didn't leave school right away. Instead, he passed by the bathroom first. Then, as he opened a stall and took a seat at the toilet, he let out a long and exhausted breath. Holy fuck. As if those words had been some kind of trigger, the next instant his back slouched forward and his until then calm and collected face turned weary and completely exhausted all of a sudden. His eyes trembling slightly. And how could he not? He's been in pain for the entire week, all thanks to the vest currently hidden under his clothes, making the 3 basic human skills torture for him to do. Walking, breathing, speaking. All necessary to be a functional human being, and all of them being actions that made Taka regret being born at the moment. Luckily, his pain was significantly less than on the first day. Compared to then, at least he wasn't crawling through the ground while breathing like he had 10 holes in his lungs anymore. In his meeting with Jiro, he managed to come up with other ways of performing these actions without looking like a zombie out of sheer desperation. From then on, he continued making small improvements in these changes so that the pain and burden would lessen as much as possible. Using muscles he didn't know were there, changing the rhythm at which he walked or breathed, applying force on different places during each action. All of those changes ultimately evolved in him managing to act completely normal on the outside, despite being in agony inside. The pain resistance skill also helped a lot to put up a good act. Although sometimes he still had to get to somewhere devoid of people so he could take a breather from keeping up the act. Hence why he was now in a bathroom stall. And right now, he had finally gotten to the supposed last day he had to keep up with this. So you've gotten a hold of the best of perfection. Then, better put it to good use, and start right away with your evolution. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle put on the vest, and wear it for an entire week. Filled right pointing small triangle do not take it off until the end of the mission. Filled right pointing small triangle do not support your own body by using aura projection. Reward. +50 aura gain the skills, true walking, true breathing, and true speaking. Neither of the conditions were completed, but he supposed that was because the mission had yet to end. When would it, though? A week had already passed, and he was still having to put up with this torture. Maybe the week would end when the day reached the same hour as it was when he got the mission. Taka could only hope. He hadn't been paying close attention back then to what hour it was, but it shouldn't be too long from now on since he was leaving school right now, much like he had been back then before he got stopped by the annoying delinquents. All he wanted was for this to end. Hua, he let out a short breath, sweeping the sweat on his forehead, exhausted already. I swear to God, if someone tries to stop me at the exit, I'm snapping their head. Right now, any kind of composure he had in him was going to keep up his act. If someone else tried to get funny with him like last week with the delinquents, then he didn't think he'd be able to spare them enough mental power to keep them alive when he crashed out. Though that might actually help me relieve some stress. With that ominous comment, Taka stood up from the bathroom seat and left the stall. His previously exhausted and defeated appearance shifted instantly to a more composed and normal one as he stepped out. Keeping that look up, he resumed his plan to leave the school. After quickly changing shoes and taking his stuff out of the locker at the entrance, he began walking towards the exit, ready to go straight home as soon as he reached the outside world. Come on. Only, yet again, someone was waiting for him there. What's this, the new tradition of the school? Taka deadpanned, but didn't slow down in the slightest. There, leaning against a wall, was Jiro, checking her phone with a bored expression. Taka glanced at her, squinting his eyes slightly. She must be waiting for someone of her class, right? She better be. I'm fine with being talked to, but not when I'm in constant agony. All I want right now is to go back home and lie on my bed until this mission is over. With fear inside him, he quickened his pace as he neared her, not wanting to be seen, regardless of her intentions. He even began looking away, fearing she would sense his gaze or something. Sadly, it didn't seem like things were going his way today. Ah, it's you, Takahashi, right. He had no choice but to stop. Then, he gave her a look, one that barely hid his annoyance. The twitching eyebrow also didn't help. Quote. What do you want? She flinched and raised an eyebrow. What's with that look? I thought we were cool from our last meeting. Taka huffed and closed his eyes. I'm not in the mood for talking right now. What? You got beat up again. Quote. Sorry. She laughed wryly, scratching the back of her head. Then, her eyes widened slightly as Taka began walking away. Oi, wait up. She quickly caught up to him, eyeing him from head to toe. You out of the cocoon already? Ha. Taka looked at her in disbelief. You know, out of your quirk's side effect or whatever. You said it was something like that. Oh. Taka rolled his eyes, recalling what he had told her. No. Then the side effect weakened. No. She blinked. But you seem fine. I'm in suffering, Taka said, keeping his deadpan. But I've adapted enough to look normal on the outside. She almost tripped at that, glaring at him with a sweat drop. And you've been going through whatever that was when we met, for an entire week. Yes. You sure you're not just dying or something? Fairly sure. Damn, any idea when it will end, then? Taka sighed. Hopefully, today. Seemed specific. Jiro gave him a curious glance. It was kind of a decision of mine to start with it in the first place, and to keep it going for an entire week as well. If I wanted, I could have ended it at any moment. She gave him a wry look. Is that evolution of yours really so worth it? Taka simply heaved a sigh and shot her a more annoyed look. Did you want something? He might have found a life hack for talking without sounding like a zombie, but that didn't change the fact that it was one hell of a task to do so. So, better go straight to the point. Huh. Oh, nothing, just, she scratched her cheek, looking a bit sheepish. You know, since we are both going to UA, I thought we could chat for a bit. Taka raised an eyebrow, letting the silence stretch for a bit before replying. Maybe tomorrow. I don't exactly feel like it right now. He was cut short as suddenly a screen popped up in front of him. Completed. So you've gotten a hold of the best of perfection. Then, better put it to good use, and start right away with your evolution. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle put on the vest, and wear it for an entire week. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle do not take it off until the end of the mission. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle do not support your own body by using aura projection. Check mark. Less than calculating reward, greater than. Less than plus 50 aura greater than. Less than plus skill true speaking greater than. Less than plus skill true breathing greater than. Less than plus skill true walking greater than. Right as the rewards began being listed by the system, Taka felt something change. It was as if his very body structure was changing. His muscles, his tendons, his bones, they weren't growing or becoming stronger, but moving. The change was minimal. He could feel it. Most of them were moving mere millimeters, and just a few past the centimeter mark. But the shift in all of them at the same time inevitably caused a great deal of pain. Taka's legs almost buckled in front of the sudden influx of agony. But the suffering only lasted about 5 seconds before it all ended. Leaving as soon as it came. For a moment, Taka was only able to focus on the relief of it finally ending, but as his mind calmed down, his eyes widened in realization. Something was different. At first, he didn't know exactly why. He simply stood there, baffled as he tried to find something different inside of him. But then, as he took a breath, the pain was gone. It still felt somewhat obstructed, but he could now breathe relatively easily, despite the pressure still being there. Not only that, but as he tried shifting his weight around, he noticed something different too. What had previously been a hellish task, having to focus constantly on using the right muscles on his legs and back to not suddenly collapse in the middle of the street, was now an almost effortless task. Like breathing, the pressure was still there, but now it barely seemed to affect him. As for talking, ahem, ooh. Well, he couldn't exactly find much of a difference, but just like the other actions, speaking was also much smoother, and the pressure barely affected him anymore. Taka looked around at himself, raising an eyebrow as he saw no change in his appearance. His muscles had been moving, that was for sure, but it appeared they hadn't caused that much of a change outside. And yet, he felt so different. Quote dot 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 exclamation mark quote. Suddenly, his eyes shone as if he had realized something. Without warning, he took off his school sweater. Then, he grabbed the vest under it and quickly took it off, leaving only his t-shirt on. The next instant, he felt it. This. His eyes widened, his mouth curling up slightly. It wasn't like he had become stronger or anything. This hadn't been gravity training, but in a way, it had been similar. Taking the vest off had freed him from the pressure his own aura applied to him, and without it, he could now feel it even more clearly. He was breathing differently, but not in a bad way. It felt like, no matter how much he forced himself, how much he ran or exercised, he would never get out of breath again. The same went for walking. Even though he was currently standing in place, he could still feel a great difference. His balance while standing was perfect. That slight awkwardness he felt sometimes, wondering if he was doing something as simple as standing correctly, was gone. He could tell the same went for walking. There was no longer any uncertainty in anything that regarded using his lower body to move or stand. If he gave a step forward right now, he knew it'd be in the most perfect way possible. Why did you suddenly begin stripping down? Suddenly, Jiro's voice snapped Taka from his daze. Right, I forgot she was there. Taka's sweat dropped. Not only had he stopped talking midwalk, but then began making strange noises, and then began taking his sweater off. Sorry about that. The moment those words came out, Jiro flinched, her eyebrow furrowing slightly. She paused. Quote dot dot dot. Can you repeat that? Sorry about that. You sound different, she commented, suddenly looking a bit shy. Taka raised an eyebrow. Really? He cleared his throat and hummed a bit, trying to feel something different, but other than feeling a bit more in control of his volume and pitch, there wasn't much difference. No, actually, that was it. Since he got the system, he'd been putting on a bit of an act in front of everyone. Along with it, he'd made his voice a tad deeper. So far, he hadn't had a voice crack or made it overly deep, but like all conscious acts, there had been times his control over it had slipped faintly. Now, though, that was no longer the case. Suddenly, he felt in total control over his voice. The deepening of his voice, which had been part of the act to sound cooler, no longer felt like an act, but simply another range his voice could take. It all felt much more natural. Jiro scratched her cheek, looking a bit confused herself. I don't know, it's just different. Taka smiled faintly. Yeah, I suppose it is. Satisfied with all the changes that he had gone through in an instant, his attention shifted to his newly acquired rewards. Quickly, he opened the 3 skills descriptions and gave them a quick overview. True speaking, passive. Description. Talking is a basic human skill. It represents the main way to communicate and convey more complex ideas to others. Yet, only a few have the true gift of swaying and igniting the spirits of those around them with only their voice. For the true aura farmer makes hearts shake, no matter what stupidity comes out of their mouth. Filled right pointing small triangle enhances the control over your voice. Filled right pointing small triangle enhances talent in speaking. Filled right pointing small triangle boosts singing related skills. Filled right pointing small triangle boosts capacity to imitate others. True breathing, passive. Description. Oxygen intake, a bodily necessity for most living beings. Yet, it's also something that represents the limits of the body, often being the reason for exhaustion, passing out, or outright dying. An aura farmer masters the need of his body for this resource, and manages it perfectly, for the true aura farmer must flex until their last breath. Filled right pointing small triangle perfects the body's motion for breathing, allowing for much larger oxygen reserves. Filled right pointing small triangle makes it harder for the body to get exhausted. Filled right pointing small triangle reduces strain during air intake. Filled right pointing small triangle you sound badass, even when breathing. True walking, passive. Description. Anyone can walk, for that is how human beings move. However, aura farmers are different. To silence a room when you stride in, to stand out from those around you by simply moving, to make a crowd make way for you simply with the aura you emanate, all of that represents a true aura farmer. Filled right pointing small triangle eliminates all awkward movements performed accidentally or intentionally during walking. Filled right pointing small triangle prevents long-term damage to the articulations. Filled right pointing small triangle reduces leg strain during physically heavy activities. Filled right pointing small triangle improved leg strength. Filled right pointing small triangle more control over the noise you make, making it dependent on you and what you decide is best for each situation. 3 passive skills, not a strange sight amidst all he had gotten so far. Actually, was there nothing but passive skills in his status? Do I even have active skills? Right, there's the unmovable object skill and the trouble radar skill. Less than immovable object, host. Greater than. Whatever you say. Regardless, a skill was a skill, passive, active, or trash, he'd always welcome more, regardless of how much he complained about them in the moment. Those harsh comments were just his frustrations at not receiving a planet-busting ability. The new three, though, were the real deal. If he had only read their names, he might have assumed they were lame, or that they wouldn't be worth much, but now that he was actually experiencing the change in his own flesh, he accepted his mistake. He was wrong. It was like he had ascended to a higher plane of existence. Like the way he'd been living before had been plainly wrong. Having checked his newly acquired skills, albeit very swiftly since there was someone beside him right now and he didn't want to appear more schizophrenic than he already had, he then opened his status page and gave his aura a quick look. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 77. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 154. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 1213. Total aura, 1263. Skills. Filled right pointing small triangle clean. Filled right pointing small triangle trouble radar. Filled right pointing small triangle connoisseur. Filled right pointing small triangle pain is just a feeling. Filled right pointing small triangle immovable object. Filled right pointing small triangle true speaking. Filled right pointing small triangle true breathing. Filled right pointing small triangle true walking. It's growing steadily. He let out a satisfied sigh. Taka dared to say, in a month or two, it was possible he'd reach the 2000 aura. Which, in terms of power, would be enough to lift around a ton. Nothing too groundbreaking in a world filled with people who had superpowers, but it would practically be on the level of a really high strength enhancing quirk. And when using that much aura in aura projection, it was like having really long hands that he could use to fly, to lift multiple things at the same time, and to reach things from afar. So it was practically even better than just some plain enhancement. He only needed to stack 800 aura points until then. Anyway, where were we? Taka turned back to Jiro, who was looking a bit weirded out by his behavior. You were explaining why you were suddenly stripping down. Quote. Suddenly, Taka didn't feel like talking anymore. To be continued. Now, Taka has become immune to scoliosis, asthma, and, stuttering. Sadly, he won't be able to do anymore. I don't know what I'm saying, ignore me. 11 comments 0 vote. New song. A month later. It was Saturday morning, and life in the city went on as usual. People strolled with friends or family for outings, heroes patrolled the streets while signing autographs, and some poor souls trudged to their jobs despite it being the weekend. Such was the cycle of life in the asphalt jungle. Just another day in the city of Shizuoka. And just like any other day in a society filled with superpowered individuals, evil ran rampant. Stay away, you bastards, or I'll leave you with so many holes that your fans will mistake you for strainers. A man covered in spikes, like a walking porcupine, snarled as he found himself surrounded by heroes. One stepped forward, his suit entirely white except for the helmet, which resembled a robotic bird. His most striking detail, however, lay in the massive pair of angelic wings spread wide behind him, like an angel. He was the hero Pidgale, number 257 in the hero ranking. Surrender now, foolish villain Edgehog. Your days of evil are numbered. He said as he pointed a finger with solemn elegance. What's with that cringass line? Edgehog bellowed. Then, he curled inward, spikes aiming in every direction like a sea urchin. Fine, if you won't leave me alone, then die. The hero's eyes widened. Before they could act, Edgehog let out a guttural roar. Omniversal perforation. An instant later, his spikes shot outward in every direction, creating an expansive wave of piercing projectiles while new ones sprouted immediately to replace them. Watch out. Protect the civilians. Quick. The heroes reacted quickly and scrambled. A woman's nails grew into a massive wall of gleaming steel, blocking the volley of spikes from hitting the crowd. Hand breakable, number 213 in the hero ranking. Another slammed his palms together, generating a shimmering bubble of energy that expanded to shield a group of kids. The spikes hammered it, the barrier trembling violently before shattering once the last projectile hit, just in time to leave them unharmed. Plasma Pop, number 344 in the hero ranking. Pidgale, however, wasn't so lucky. Spotting a group of students watching from too close to the approaching wave, he leapt forward, spreading his wings as a shield. But unlike another, more famous winged hero, his feathers weren't weapons nor as hard as metal, they were just wings. Arg! The spikes pierced with ease, some lodging in his back despite his suit's protection, though, fortunately, it did help prevent them from getting too deep. Damn you! He growled, blood dripping from his feathers. As civilians were pushed back to safety, he and the other heroes regrouped back in front of Edgehog, glaring at him in anger. The villain laughed manically. Ha ha ha. Now you see the difference. Your pathetic little quirks can't. Chaka-chan. Suddenly, the sound of a roaring electric guitar split the air, silencing everything. Heads whipped toward its source, eyes wide. There. Who's that? Could it be? A figure stood imposingly atop a streetlight. Arms crossed, perfectly balanced despite the narrow footing, and a black hoodie that hid the figure's features completely, giving it a mysterious air. Beside him floated a guitar and a pair of speakers, humming with power. The instant they all saw him, the crowd erupted. Is that? Yeah, the mysterious guitarist. He showed up again. Hell yeah, this was getting boring. That guy knows how to make a good show. The heroes exchanged puzzled looks at the sudden outburst. Mysterious guitarist? Pidgale asked, baffled. Oh, I know about him, Plasma Pop replied with a snort, eyeing the person in the lightpost disdainfully. Some nobody who shows up during our fights to play his songs in the background. He's been getting a bit popular lately, but the guy's nothing more than a dirty vigilante, using his quirk without a license and even participating directly in villain takedowns. So, a smartass, huh? Hand Breakable cracked her knuckles before slamming a fist into her palm, itching to knock him down. Well, he's not meddling with our arrest, that's for sure. I don't want the hero commission paying us less because some vigilante butted in without asking. Right away, she began walking toward the mysterious guitarist. Hold on, Hand Breakable. Plasma Pop grabbed her shoulder, yanking her back. While he has sometimes butted in, it was most of the time when the heroes were at a disadvantage. He seems to care more about his show than about actually taking the villain down. So, he still needs a beating. Pidgale walked up to them, calming her. Leave it, Hand Breakable. He may be someone we need to arrest later, but there's an actual villain in front of us right now. Let's deal with the bigger threat and then see how we deal with that one later. Tisk. While the heroes debated, the porcupine villain ground his teeth. Who are you? He roared, turning his fury toward the stranger who dared to interrupt. The guitarist gave no reply. He stood tall on the streetlight, arms still crossed, radiating elegance as if answering would only cheapen his presence. That silence only made Edgehog angrier. So you're just gonna stand there, huh? He raised his arm, spikes bristling and locking onto the figure above. In that case, be gone. With a shout, a dozen needles fired, fast as bullets, straight for the guitarist. The heroes flinched, some ready to leap forward to save the fool chasing clout. But they froze when the impossible happened. The spikes stopped midair. Every bit of momentum vanished as though time itself had frozen for them. Quote. What? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heroes, civilians, even Edgehog stared in disbelief at the guitarist, who now had one arm calmly extended forward. It didn't stop there, however. The instant the stranger clenched his fist. Crack! All the frozen needles shattered in unison, crumbling into harmless fragments that rained down onto the street. Edgehog's jaw dropped. His sweat shone under the sun. Impossible. My spikes are hard as stone. How could they? Enough, Edgehog, your vile crimes end here. Surrender now, or face the beatdown of your life. He was cut short as suddenly the trio of superheroes dashed at him, forcing him to focus back on them. You fools, even though you saw the difference between us, you still think you stand a chance. Very well, I'll skewer all of you as you wish so much. And like that, the battle began. Back on his lightpost, the guitarist lowered his arm, unbothered by the fact that he'd just been attacked, and instead simply glaring at the battle below in silence for a few seconds, until suddenly. Bzzz. The speakers at his side powered on, letting out a low but prominent hum, returning the attention of the masses to him, some even looking expectant. With all eyes back on him, he tapped the lightpost twice with his feet, and as if on cue, suddenly a heavy bass line rumbled out, slow at first, but growing, building momentum. In that instant, everyone understood. The performance had begun. Playing Animal I Have Become. Excitement surged through the crowd. Fans started bobbing their heads, phones shot up to record, and the atmosphere thickened with anticipation. The guitar floated into the man's hands like a weapon returning to its master. A sharp riff cut through the bass, the sound raw and powerful, adding fuel to the rising storm, coupled with powerful battery beats that only filled the song with more power. Feet stomped. Shouts of hype rippled through the bystanders. And then, I can't escape this hell. A distorted voice poured from the speakers, deep and static-laced, transformed by a voice changer, but instead of breaking the immersion, it enhanced it, electric, mechanical, perfect for the song's mood. So many times I've tried. Some people reacted, looking at each other, surprised, before glancing back at the lone figure of the guitarist high above, their smiles rising. But I'm still caged inside. The sound swelled, instruments building momentum. Everyone could feel the peak approaching. Somebody get me through this nightmare. The air vibrated, the whole street holding its breath. I can't control myself. The drop was here. The battle had turned into a stage. So what if you can see? Comma. Degree. 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 Takas Pav. Comma. Hell yeah, my aura is shooting up tonight. Watching the crowd move in unison as the drop hit, I grinned behind my mask. I already had another angle recording, my aura projection keeping the camera steady in the best spot, while also helping me balance on the light post, and also stopping my speakers from plummeting to the ground. Once I uploaded this, not only would I rake in a huge bonus in aura, but my passive income would spike back up, maybe even higher than before. If all went well, I'd hit 2000 aura by the end of the month. Totally worth the prep. Truth was, I'd had this song ready almost a month ago. The only reason I'd held off was because of the skill I'd unlocked back then. True speaking. That skill cranked up my singing talent and voice control. Combine that with connoisseur, and it would have been a crime not to add the lyrics and some of the instruments, those were literally this song's strongest weapons when put together right. So I spent the last month grinding, learning to sing, learning to play the other instruments nicely enough so I could record at least one good try, and then use it as playback while I did the guitar. At first, I doubted it was worth the time. My earnings had been dropping day by day, the longer I stayed out of the spotlight. Honestly, I thought I'd screwed up. But looking now, seeing people jumping, dancing, losing themselves in the music, I knew I'd made the right call. No, this was the best call. So what if you can see the darkest side of me? So this is what it felt like to be a rockstar, huh? It wasn't too bad. Feeling my hands flow along with the song, hitting each note like thunder, the sweat dropping through my eyebrows, the sound of people vibing, it was amazing. That, coupled with the epic battle between the team of heroes against the villain going down there, only made this greater. For a moment, I thought, should I dedicate myself to this instead of being a hero? Honestly, this was great, seeing the people enjoy what I was playing, seeing masses dancing and jumping in unison to a song that I personally liked a lot, and that I was playing, it was addicting. But that was the problem. This wasn't my song. My smile faltered a bit. Well, does it matter? They are liking it, and I'm raking aura like crazy. As long as my power grew, it didn't really matter if this was cheating or not. I couldn't bother to worry about honesty, not when UA was some months from now on. I needed to gather as much power as I could before I had to begin fighting the big bads. Yeah, what am I thinking? I should just continue playing. I can't escape this heel. This animal. This animal. Comma. The people loved it, sure, but now that I thought about it, should I really be proud of achieving this? The only thing I had done was reconstruct the song from memory, and then recorded most of the other instruments to play in the background while I took care of the guitar. This wasn't mine. I was just copying what existed, or what exists somewhere else. It felt a bit empty, now that I thought about it. My fingers faltered slightly. Was all this aura I was gaining really mine? Don't misunderstand me, I loved power. Right now, I am incomparable to a few months ago when I unlocked my system. But, a part inside of me, maybe the part that had been brainwashed, that part, couldn't help but think. Is this power earned through copying others, really the type of power I want to earn? I had the skills, the talent, and the power to do it on my own. So why couldn't I? Yeah, why couldn't I? My fingers increased in speed, feeling something akin to anger sprout inside me. Then, a notification popped up. You've taken a step forward in your path to true aura farming, for the true aura farmer does not steal. The aura farmer creates, shows, and inspires. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle develop your own song. Filled right pointing small triangle once done, present it in a place with more than 1,000 people. Filled right pointing small triangle have people enjoy your song. Reward. Plus 1000 aura, gain the skill, imaginary technique. My theme. A song of my own. That thought quietly crossed my mind as I read the mission, while my fingers started nearing the end of the song. Soon, my voice began dimming in the background, and the notes I was playing became weaker. The crowd began calming down, enjoying the end of the song. And, as I looked down, seeing the heroes still busy with the villain despite being 3 against 1, I sighed. Then, the next second. Bam! I used my aura projection to slam him right into the ground, immobilizing him. I couldn't have him continue fighting when the song had ended, right? While I was at it, I also crushed all his spikes, not entirely, but just the tips, so he couldn't use them like weapons nor regenerate them like earlier. But with him unconscious, I don't know whether he'd do something like that. Well, not like it mattered. As the heroes rushed him, I heaved a sigh, and finally, I put an end to the song. Huff. That sure had been exhausting. As the hum of the guitar faded away, I cleaned the sweat on my forehead with my forearm before glancing at the people below, who were watching me with wide eyes. I suppose I gotta end this properly. I let go of my guitar, letting it float beside the speakers, and bowed in one fluid, practiced motion. The crowd cheered, and a small smile appeared on my face. Next time, it'll be something that's truly mine you're cheering for. With that, I turned around, preparing to leave once again. But just as I was about to jump away, using my aura to fly away, a technique that I had picked up not long ago, and that hadn't been that hard to figure out. Wee-oh-wee-oh. Police cars swarmed the street below. Faster than I had been expecting. All this for one villain. I sneered, amused at their quick reaction to what was not that big deal of a villain. Regardless, I floated my hidden camera into my pocket and prepared to fly off. Mysterious guitarist, stop where you are. You are charged with illegal quirk usage. Come down without resistance. Huh. I paused, then snapped my head to them. Hold on, they are after me. I blinked, too stunned to do anything. Then, a taser flew my way, making me dodge. It wasn't hard, but it allowed me to snap out of it. And the worst came right after. Sometimes those who shine too bright draw jealousy, and the desire to bring them down. Now, you face your first hurdle with society. Your moments of pure aura have displeased some people, and you've landed on their wanted list. Time for a tactical retreat. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle run away. Filled right pointing small triangle farm aura while avoiding capture. Filled right pointing small triangle evade the police's detection for at least 10 minutes. Reward. Aura gain amount varies depending on how cool you look while escaping. Skill gained. Good job beating me, but that was merely a clone. Shit. Escape. Minutes later. Comma. Fuck, they're here. The consequences of my actions are here. Stop right there, mysterious guitarist, or you'll be charged with fleeing the scene. A voice crackled over a patrol radio as officers pursued a figure streaking through the sky. I flipped them the middle finger as I flew away, all my equipment floating behind me. Plus 15 points in style. There's style points now. I blurted when the notification popped up. No, I was just kidding. You flip between being a comedian and an emotionless system whenever you like, huh? Better focus on getting away, host. Shut up. Everything is under control. Ratatatatata. The sound of a helicopter closing in cut off my comment. I craned my neck and sure enough, a police chopper was hovering overhead. Oh, come on, man. The sky now too. Seems like you are not in control, host. You're not helping. The true aura farmer keeps his cool, even when annoyed by the voices in his head. I'm merely helping you train. Can I turn you off? No. You suck. Stop. You vigilante, time to put an end to your delinquentish tendencies. While I was busy bickering in my own head, a figure flashed across my path. Pidgale, the pigeon hero, flapping his wings majestically. God, what an awful name. Stop, or I'll be forced to act. I just swatted him down with a push of aura, splatting him against the pavement below. I cushioned the fall, of course, didn't want to be charged with serious assault on an actual hero. That would only make things worse. Plus 35 style points. You're still on that. Ratatatata. Another helicopter screamed in. This one wasn't just monitoring. Damn you, vigilante. You actually struck a hero. Time to put you in your place. Hand breakable peeked from the chopper hatch, Plasma Pop standing at her side. The chopper streaked, and they touched down on a nearby building, gearing up to intercept. They're actually turning on me now that the villain's down, huh? I clicked my tongue, changed direction, and flew away from that roof. Hey, where are you going? Come back here. I left them watching as I vanished into the distance. They couldn't fly like Pidgale or me, so they would need to wait for the helicopter to pick them up again if they wanted to resume the chase. Too bad, so sad. I snorted. Slamming one hero against the ground was enough criminal record in my resume for today. So I wanted no more fights with heroes for now, regardless of whether I could win or not. At least that was the plan. Then I heard strange noises coming from my back, and froze. I spun, and my eyes widened. The hell? Handbreakable was launching herself at me, one nail extending and thus propelling her off the building, then every other nail in her hand morphed and combined into a giant steel hammer swinging my way. Oh shit. I tried to slow the hammer with aura. KGH. Sadly, its momentum and weight won. I was battened away. Clang. Bam. Moments later, I slammed through a building and landed in someone's living room. The family looked up from dinner as I collapsed across their sofa, winded and sore. That shit hurt, I muttered and checked my status. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 82. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 164 right pointing arrow 992. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 1328 right pointing arrow 500. Total aura, 1328. Skills. Filled right pointing small triangle clean. Filled right pointing small triangle trouble radar. Filled right pointing small triangle connoisseur. Filled right pointing small triangle pain is just a feeling. Filled right pointing small triangle immovable object. Filled right pointing small triangle true speaking. Filled right pointing small triangle true breathing. Filled right pointing small triangle true walking. Good thing I'd swapped aura in time, otherwise I'd be already out and probably in the hospital. That had been quite a blow, after all. I was sore, maybe a bit hurt, but still capable of moving. Still, I didn't want to think about what would have happened if I had taken the blow without my defenses boosted. Alright, now it's personal. From my sprawled posture on the couch I was laying on, I made a come gesture. My guitar and the speakers floated back toward me the next second. I'd managed to grab onto them with the last sliver of aura projection I'd kept, despite being swatted away like a fly. With my gear secured, I let the guitar and speakers float onto the couch where I lay and dropped them there. Why? Because I needed every ounce of aura to teach this bitch a lesson. Instruments safe, I floated up and exited the apartment through the hole I'd made on the way in. Hey. Standing on the opposite building, arms crossed and smirking, was Handbreakable. A vein popped at my temple. Alright. She asked for it. I'm gonna humiliate her publicly. Decision made, I beckoned to her with a hand. Her smirk froze. You little. Very well, if that's what you want, then here you have it. She screamed. She pushed off the building with one hand's nails and formed the giant steel hammer with the other, swinging it down at me and the apartment behind me. So much for heroes avoiding property damage. I scoffed, my eyes going to the apartment behind me for an instant before returning to the incoming hammer. But just before it could reach me. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 82. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 992 right pointing arrow 1492. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 500 right pointing arrow 0. Immovable object activated. Clang. The metal hammer struck heavily, letting out a deafening ring that echoed for a few seconds before it ceased. Quote. Handbreakable blinked, stunned that her attack had suddenly stopped, then her eyes fell on what her hammer had struck. Only to find it stopped dead by a single finger of mine. Impossible. She stammered, eyes trembling. Ratatatata. A helicopter drifted closer, carrying Plasma Pop and Pidgale, who looked roughed up but mildly fine, thanks to my cushioning. Soon, the chopper touched down on a nearby roof. Handbreakable, stop. You're causing property damage. A voice shouted. If you're going to fight, bring him down to the street, we've cleared the area. Another barked. Handbreakable snapped out of her daze and finally noticed the apartment hole behind me. Before she could react. Be gone. I flicked my finger. Bang. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 82. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 1492 right pointing arrow 164. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection. 0 right pointing arrow 1328. With my aura back again, I sent her straight to a market full of stalls. She crashed into the tents, sending fruit and wood flying. That didn't make it any less humiliating, though. Sent flying with a flick, that had to sting. But that's what she gets for getting rough. Next, I turned my attention to the helicopter and, without even the slightest hesitation, aimed my hand at it. Hey, what the hell are you? The heroes became startled as I began shoving it towards the building below with my AP, making land against the machine's will. It resisted, of course. The propellers spun wildly and let out a weird sound as they fought to rise in the air again, but before it had the chance to. CRRKK. I closed my fist and crushed the propellers for good with the aura, basically trapping the heroes and pilot in the roof I'd made them land. Pidgale still looked like he might move, though, since he had wings and all. So before he had the chance, I flicked him too. Where, you ask? Ha ha ha, did you really think one mere flick would be enough to defeat Ack? I sent him barreling straight into Hand Breakable, who was already coming back. Both heroes collided and tumbled down to the street, leaving Plasma Pop stuck and looking dumbfounded between them and me in the nearest building, not knowing what to do or how to get out of there. Guess that's all from these heroes, huh? I sneered and waved a hand. My instruments floated back to me. With that, I rose in the air and began to drift away. Sorry to the family whose wall I'd ruined, but that was on Hand Breakable's tab. Time to go for good. Comma. Degree. 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 Half an hour later. Comma. These guys are persistent. I muttered, staring at the cordon of police cars down below. Why were they going this hard for a guy who just played a song and smacked a villain? Chill out. With how relentless they are, how the hell am I supposed to stay hidden for 10 minutes? I sighed. Right now, I was tucked behind a car in a 3-story parking garage, out of sight from the helicopters circling above. As for my stuff, I had left all of it behind another car 2 or 3 parking spots away from where I was, hoping that, if they found it, that would delay them long enough from finding me. I'd shaken most of the heat earlier and slipped in here during that opportunity, so even if they had a rough idea of the area, they didn't know I was in this building yet. That gave me a sliver of time. I opened the mission window. Sometimes those who shine too bright draw jealousy, and the desire to bring them down. Now, you face your first hurdle with society. Your moments of pure aura have displeased some people, and you've landed on their wanted list. Time for a tactical retreat. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle run away. Filled right pointing small triangle farm aura while avoiding capture. Filled right pointing small triangle evade the police's detection for at least 10 minutes. 2 minutes 39 seconds remaining. Reward. Aura gain amount varies depending on how cool you look while escaping. Skill gained. Good job beating me, but that was merely a clone. Hiss. Can you hurry up? I muttered, annoyed that 10 minutes could be this slow. My worry only intensified when I began hearing some officers sweeping the lower floors now. Already. If they reached the one I was on, I was toast. They'd make sure to look at every single corner, including the one I was in. Please let them take their time, I prayed, waving my 2 clamped hands up and down. At least 2. I forced my voice to a halt as I heard a bunch of cars coming up. Slowly, I peeked from behind the car, squinting at what I saw. A few cruisers were arriving at this level, lights from the cars cutting through dust as a bunch of cops stepped out and started turning on their flashlights while they began their search. I hugged the wheel well and hoped they'd just give a quick look and dismiss this place. They didn't. The cars were parked, and I began hearing them look by foot carefully through each parking spot. You've got to be kidding me. I checked the timer. Filled right pointing small triangle evade the police's detection for at least 10 minutes. 1 minute 52 seconds remaining. Nearly 2 minutes. Things weren't looking too bright. At the speed they were going, and judging by their numbers, I had around 30 seconds before they reached my spot. Once they found me, the timer would reset, and I'd have to begin running away all over again. Damn it. Panic flickered in me. What am I gonna, hold on. At that moment, a plan flickered, and a small grin adorned my face. Using aura projection, I ghosted a walkie-talkie out of an officer's pocket without him noticing and guided it to me without anyone seeing. Once in my power, I flipped it on. He's here, 2nd floor, come quick. I did my best impression of a panicked officer and fed it to the device. True speaking coming in clutch for the impression. What? Replies crackled. You heard him. Go go go. Officers scrambled back to their cars. Most of them, at least. Two stayed. One of them realized his radio was missing. Hey, where did my walkie go? He barked. Crap, gotta tell the others it's a decoy. The backup shouted, reaching for his own radio. I couldn't have that. So, before he could reach it, I snatched the second walkie with my aura and sent it sailing against a wall. Crack. Next, it broke into many parts. That fucker. Hey, come out wherever you are. That thing was expensive. The cops shouted. Yeah, come out now, you're trapped. They were angry. Sorry, not sorry. Filled right pointing small triangle evade the police's detection for at least 10 minutes. 48 seconds remaining. 48 seconds. The finish line was finally in sight. Hey, I think I heard a voice overlapping with the voice from the walkie-talkie earlier in that direction, come on. One officer shouted, suddenly heading toward my corner. We got you now. The other followed immediately. Why now? My teeth ground. 40 seconds. How do I make them ignore this stretch for 40 more seconds? I could shove them away with aura, but that risked revealing my location, and I don't know if that counted as being detected. I'd already gambled on the stolen walkie. I couldn't afford more luck tests. I had to find another way. Footsteps came closer. They were heading straight for the car I was hiding behind, about to reach it. Oh. Then, another idea sparked. Slowly, carefully, I lifted myself with aura, floating just enough not to touch the floor. Then, I slid along the side of the car, keeping its bulk between me and the officers. Silent as air, thanks to levitation. But then, they split. One circled left, the other right. Cutting off my escape. Shit. Desperate, I pulled my last card. Tack. I tapped the car opposite, just hard enough to make a noise, but not to make it obvious it was a diversion. Did it fool them? Maybe not. But it made them pause, heads snapping toward the sound. And that pause was all I needed. Mission complete. Sometimes those who shine too bright draw jealousy, and the desire to bring them down. Now, you face your first hurdle with society. Your moments of pure aura have displeased some people, and you've landed on their wanted list. Time for a tactical retreat. Conditions for completion. Filled right pointing small triangle run away. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle farm aura while avoiding capture. Check mark. Filled right pointing small triangle evade the police's detection for at least 10 minutes. Check mark. Less than calculating reward, greater than. Less than for flexing awesomely during your escape, plus 450 aura. Greater than. Less than plus skill less than M greater than good job beating me, but that was merely a clone. Greater than. Without wasting a second, I opened the skill description. If it was what I thought it was, it'd be exactly what I needed right now. Good job beating me, but that was merely a clone. Active. Description. A battle worthy of gods erupts, punches decimate buildings, kicks ravage streets, and the weak can only watch from afar as titans clash. Minutes pass. Hours. The battlefield becomes a wasteland by then. At last, your rival lands a clean blow. You buckle, falling to one knee. His victory is certain. But then, your body dissolves. A booming laugh echoes from above, freezing him in shock. Good job beating me, but that was merely a clone. Filled right pointing small triangle spend a portion of your stats to create a perfect aura clone. Filled right pointing small triangle clones mirror you completely, personality and knowledge-wise, being fragments of your aura, and hence, of you. Filled right pointing small triangle clones do not receive any of your stats, only your aura, so they have to make up for their lack of stats with it. So, have in mind they might need to spend a bit of the aura you give them to build their corporeal body. Filled right pointing small triangle once a clone is defeated dissolved, you regain half the stats spent instantly, the rest return within an hour. Filled right pointing small triangle clones can choose to dissolve if they deem it the correct choice. Filled right pointing small triangle you can dissolve clones on command. Filled right pointing small triangle clones can only last up to a day. Filled right pointing small triangle clones can receive only up to 50% of your stats, not more, for a clone cannot surpass the original. Filled right pointing small triangle you receive the clone's memories upon its cessation. Well, good enough, I smirked. Time to escape for good. Good job beating me, but that was merely a clone. Activated. The next instant, part of my aura split off and condensed beside me, slowly materializing into a literal me. Same costume, same mask. He was standing there, calm. Freeze. The two police officers' heads snapped to him immediately. I sucked in a breath and glanced at my clone. He smiled faintly, then turned his back and ran. Oi, we told you to freeze. The taser, use the taser. Ah, crap. One of them fired a taser at my running clone, but with it using aura projection to block it, it stalled midair and clattered harmlessly to the ground. The officers watched helplessly as my clone slipped out toward the edge of the parking floor, dove off the railing, and flew up toward a circling helicopter, flicking them the middle finger as he passed. Meanwhile, the two cops bolted down the stairwell, probably to warn the others. Exactly what I needed. Phew. As they left, I eased out from behind the car, gestured for my instruments and camera, and had them float back to my side. I opened my status out of habit. Status page. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 82. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 164. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 1328. Total aura, 1778 right pointing arrow 1422, 80%. First clone's aura, 355, 20%. Skills. Filled right pointing small triangle clean. Filled right pointing small triangle trouble radar. Filled right pointing small triangle connoisseur. Filled right pointing small triangle pain is just a feeling. Filled right pointing small triangle immovable object. Filled right pointing small triangle true speaking. Filled right pointing small triangle true breathing. Filled right pointing small triangle true walking. Filled right pointing small triangle good job beating me, but that was merely a clone. I raised an eyebrow at the percentages on what used to be my total aura, before upping my aura projection with the aura I had just gained, thanks to the mission. Then, with that done, I crept to the edge of the parking level and peered out. In the distance, my clone was already leading a convoy of helicopters and police cars away. He moved slower than I would have. No surprise, he only had 20% of my aura, so his capabilities were limited. Hopefully that's enough to keep them busy for a while. I prayed inwardly. Then, after a sigh of relief once everything seemed to come to an end, I turned and floated off in the opposite direction, soon diving off the railing just like my clone and flying away into the distance. It was time to go home. A clone's life. A clone's life. Clone's POV. Haha, so easy. I thought, a wide grin hidden behind my mask. I turned and saw a huge cavalry of cops tailing me, 2 or 3 helicopters overhead, and a convoy of cruisers below, sirens wailing. Normally, I'd be panicking, knowing escape was pretty unlikely, and especially so at the speed I was going right now. But I was a clone, and I could return to the original whenever I wanted. There were no stakes here, no worries at all. Right now, I felt invincible. Although I hardly am. I thought, giving my cloney status a look. Status page clone. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 40. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 40. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 275. Total aura 20% of the original, 355. Skills. Filled right pointing small triangle clean. Filled right pointing small triangle trouble radar. Filled right pointing small triangle connoisseur. Filled right pointing small triangle pain is just a feeling. Filled right pointing small triangle immovable object. Filled right pointing small triangle true speaking. Filled right pointing small triangle true breathing. Filled right pointing small triangle true walking. I still had my skills, but my stats sucked. I could barely keep myself afloat right now with those 200 aura points. But, well, it didn't matter. All I needed was to distract the police long enough so the original could bail. Thus, escaping wasn't necessary. I just needed to keep them on my trail. Ha ha ha, yeah, keep following, you bastards. I smirked as I observed the army following behind from the corner of my eye, hands in my pockets like I was cool. Nothing said I couldn't aura farm while acting as a decoy, right? I grinned behind the mask and turned back ahead, worried that since I wasn't looking to the front, I might crash into a building. Then my grin died. Huh. A figure stood on a tall building up ahead, arms crossed as if waiting for me. For a moment, I wondered if it might have been someone who wanted to see the show from close. But as I got closer, I was able to discern his appearance better. That ridiculous costume, that cocky smirk, that blonde hair, it all had a tinge of familiarity that hold on, why is that guy here? My eyes widened as panic hit. I skidded mid-flight, ready to change direction and bolt, but I'd already screwed up. I should have reacted the instant my eyes settled on him. Before I could get away, The figure leapt from the roof, did a motherfucking flip, and latched with his tail onto one of the helicopters following me, hanging just a few meters away from me. Why in such a hurry? The bastard called. I poured most of the stats I had into aura projection and tried to speed up, wanting nothing to do with this fucker, but it was too late. Trouble radar flared, warning me of incoming danger, but with this weakened body, I just didn't have the speed to respond. By the time my head snapped up to lock onto the threat, he was already dropping on me with a kick aimed straight at my back. Damn. In one last desperate move, I moved my stats from AP to defense. Let's talk down at street level. It's what he said. Moments later, I felt his foot connect with my poor back. Bam. Arg. Sadly, with the amount of aura I had as a clone, it merely stopped my bones from breaking on impact. But I was still sent like a bullet to the ground. Crash. Seconds later, I hit the pavement like a meteorite. I tried to cushion the blow by moving half of my aura to AP again at the last second, but I still ended up taking a nasty hit despite my efforts. The bastard, on the other hand, had used his kick on me to launch himself off my back and not fall along with me. I groaned as I rubbed my ribs and forced myself up. The asphalt had cracked slightly where I'd landed, proof of the hell of a force I had been slammed onto the street. This guy doesn't hold back at all. I pushed to my feet and turned around. Soon, I was able to see the bastard as he slid down a gutter from a nearby building and landed on the street, still looking cocky as hell. As he hit the asphalt, he slammed his fist onto his palm, looking at me with a grin. You made quite the mess today, mysterious guitarist. They even called me, the best hero in this city, to handle you, and I was enjoying a peaceful rest. He crowed. I said nothing, so he just kept talking. You've been causing a hell of a lot of trouble lately, attacking a villain, hitting heroes, wrecking private property, what were you thinking? The damage to private property is on the hero who sent me flying with a giant hammer, I answered, warping my voice with my newfound talent thanks to true speaking. This guy had sharp ears, so I didn't want to risk him recognizing me. Though on hindsight, maybe I shouldn't have said anything at all. Why is he staring at me like that? Did I actually screw up? I winced when he tilted his head and gave me an interested look. He didn't call me out, though. He just smiled slyly. Yes, you're right on that. She'll get chewed out by the brass later, but for now, I think you should focus on yourself. I swallowed hard, sweat beating down my cheek. Yeah, I suppose I will. Without hesitation, I shifted all my aura into my physical stats. Status page clone. Filled right pointing small triangle strength, 40 right pointing arrow 177. Filled right pointing small triangle defense, 40 right pointing arrow 178. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection, 275 right pointing arrow 0. Total aura 20%, 355. With the little amount of aura I had, keeping it on AP was useless. He was too damn fast and strong for me to do anything with it properly. My aura projection would be nothing more than a small inconvenience for him. Like he had said, he was indeed the strongest hero of this city. I didn't stand a chance as I was right now. Maybe the original would, but not me. So, since I was going down for sure, I thought I might as well make this defeat of mine as epic as possible, and actually go down by throwing hands with the strongest hero of this city. After all, clone or not, I was still an aura farmer at my core, was I not? So, having made up my mind, I raised my fists and took my stance. But to my surprise, instead of jumping me, the bastard blinked, then laughed. Ha ha ha, you're not even hiding it anymore, huh? I don't know what you're talking about, I said, keeping my voice warped by true speaking. He snorted. You don't, huh? It's nothing much, I just thought that stance looked similar to one I taught my ward. Excuse me for laughing. Yeah, this guy knew. If I may ask, mysterious guitarist, why are you suddenly eager to engage in combat when you mostly use telekinesis? He taunted. Because I want to smash that face of yours with my fist, I snapped. Truly, what an odd resemblance. He took his stance. Then I suppose I'll give you the pleasure of fighting me when I go serious. Just come already. Very well. He lunged. You fared fairly well against those 3 heroes earlier, so let's see how long you last against the Super Monkey. Seiji, my guardian, and the hero Super Monkey, number 69 in the rankings by decision, had arrived. This is gonna be hard, I thought, and without further ado, lunged too. Right now, I, the clone, had better physical stats than the original usually showed in training. The original favored aura projection, so his body normally stayed average, though he could swap stats whenever he wanted. Still, this was more strength and sturdiness than Seiji had seen me use in practice. And I was gonna make the best of it. Bang! Our fists connected with each other's faces as we both snapped back a few steps. However, unlike me, who clenched my teeth as my face snapped to the side from the force, Seiji laughed like he had enjoyed it, still facing me. Ha ha ha. When did you get this strong, kid? He jeered. I don't know you, I continued with the gaslighting. Right. He muttered, obviously not believing me, and resumed the fight as if my strike from earlier had barely affected him. Aura. Bam. Ack. Another fist slammed into my face. This time, I wasn't able to give one in return. What's worse is that it didn't end there. Smack. Right after the punch, he buried a nasty knee into my solar plexus. I staggered back, air escaping me as I almost buckled. Ultimately, I managed to stay on my feet, knowing that if I fell, that would have left me even more open to any kind of attack. Sadly, despite my achievement, it didn't seem Seiji was planning on celebrating it. The instant I lifted my gaze back up, I saw him lunging at me like a tiger. I tried to fend him off, but my combat skills were still too lacking compared to his. By the time I realized what had happened, he already had me on the ground, locked in a chokehold, cutting off my air. I struggled to breathe, trying to hit him in any way possible so he would let go. Thud, thud, thud. Sadly, my meager attacks barely seemed to faze him. Actually, he even seemed disappointed, shaking his head as I continued to strike him. Still too slow, still too predictable, what have we been doing the past few months? I thought you improved. That line pissed me off. Status page clone. Filled right pointing small triangle strength. 177 right pointing arrow 315. Filled right pointing small triangle defense. 178 right pointing arrow 40. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection. 0. Total aura 20%, 355. Reacting on instinct, I pumped most of my stats into strength and, without hesitation. Whack. Arg, you brat. I rammed the back of my head into his nose while he kept the lock. I felt my skull crack, but ignored it. With that blow, I managed to make him let go immediately, and I quickly popped up. But of course, I was far from done with this fucker. While he clutched his nose in pain, I slammed my foot on the ground and, using my momentarily enhanced strength, bam! Blasted myself like a missile toward him. Switching my stats while at it. Status page clone. Filled right pointing small triangle strength. 345 right pointing arrow 10. Filled right pointing small triangle defense. 10 right pointing arrow 345. Filled right pointing small triangle aura projection. 0. Total aura 20%, 355. With endurance boosted and momentum built from that burst of strength, I slammed my head into his gut, folding him in half. After connecting, I crashed to the ground while he skidded back several meters, still on his feet but definitely having gotten his air knocked. Then, as he recovered from the blow, I rebalanced my stats to the 170s each and quickly scrambled back to my feet. Ready for him to launch his counterattack. How's that? Seeing his pained look, a faint smirk popped up behind my mask. He stayed quiet for a moment, rubbing the spot I'd hit. Then he said, yeah, you've gotten strong, brat, I guess I don't need to hold back then. Hold bah. My question died as he vanished from view, and I felt myself being lifted, suplexed into the air. Oh shit. Bam. My head slammed into the pavement crudely, and the instant he let go of the suplex, I plummeted to the ground. This time, without a comeback, nor a way out of this. Just like that, I was out. I lay there, dizzy, watching Seiji stand over me with that shitating grin. I made sure not to give you cerebral damage, so be grateful, brat. Sirens and the roar of helicopters filled the air. Police cars swarmed in and choppers hovered low. I was boxed in. Seiji glanced toward the arriving officers, then back at me, his expression sharpening. I don't know why you did this, kid. He muttered so only I could hear. I'm your guardian, so I'll help as much as I can, but I'm also a hero. I can't stop the law from taking its course, so be prepared to face the consequences of your actions. I stared at him, amusedly, without saying anything. Then, only when he seemed to be about to tell the police to come closer, I sneered mockingly, catching his attention back. Like I've been saying so far, you're mistaking me for someone else. Enough, kid. You're busted. His voice turned serious. I laughed. Busted. Guess you're right. This is as far as I get. Question mark quote. As cops sprinted closer, I decided to end the show. Time to go home, I muttered. Then, kid. Seiji knelt beside me, eyes wide as I began to vanish, growing transparent. I used that moment. With a last effort, I threw a punch. Thud. It landed square on his cheek, making his head snap to the side for a second. Take that, sucker. Then, I slumped back to the pavement, this time truly unable to move, but still not fully out. As Seiji stared, baffled, I grinned with what little strength I had and let out a short laugh. I don't know who this kid you keep mistaking me with is, but I'm sure he's at home right now, being a model student. Huh. And with that, Ivani. Comma. Degree. At home, Taka's Pav. Comma. Suddenly, the memories of my clone hit me. It was weird, confusing, disorienting. But after a minute or so, my head cleared and I managed to assimilate the flood of new knowledge. That damn Seiji, so that's why he wasn't home when I arrived. I smiled wryly. I was already back at my place after today's wild adventure, having stashed all the gear from my little show, and even having changed my clothes just in case. Now I was reviewing the recordings I'd gotten while sheltering in my room, outside of anyone's eye. It was good. Too good. This would be gold once I uploaded it to my channel. Not only was the audio impressive, but I also put on a little show while playing the guitar without noticing, so the video was dynamic as well. Add the battle of the heroes against Edgehog in the lower part of the video, and that made it even crazier. My passive earnings are gonna flare up again. I leaned back on my chair and threw my hands in the air in celebration. The song was new, the stunt chaotic, and considering I'd managed to piss off half the city's police force, the views were bound to blow up more than ever. How much am I gonna get daily now? 15, 20 aura per day. Ha ha ha, I can't wait to see my gains skyrocket. I grinned brightly as I imagined my future prosperity. But of course, for that, I had to upload the video first. So, having had enough of being lost in my fantasies, I turned on the editing program and began putting my hands to work. After that, quite a few minutes probably passed. 10, 20, maybe even 30, I don't know really. I hadn't checked the hour when I began, so checking it now wouldn't help get the answer. The sound of clicks, and me tapping multiple keys on my keyboard filled my otherwise silent room. I was about halfway done by then, having edited parts where the sound weirded out a bit, and adding a few effects so it wouldn't be just a raw video of me singing. I was just about to add a skull emoji, because that's what all edits did, but as I looked for a proper image online. Slam. The door to my room burst open. I closed the video faster than someone caught watching porn right away. Phew, that was pretty close. Having hidden the evidence of my crime, I turned around, keeping my face as normal as possible and slouching one arm over my chair coolly. Hey, what's up bitch? Standing in the doorway was Seiji. He looked a bit roughed up, breathing hard as if he'd just finished running a marathon. Hey, it seemed my clone had given him some trouble. On second thought, how did he get home so quickly? Did he run all the way back here? What a psycho. There were at least 5 kilometers between the place my clone fought him and the house. Huff, huff, you. As he saw me sitting coolly on my chair like the proper and decent person I am, he squinted his eyes, glaring at me suspiciously. What? I raised an eyebrow, as if daring him to accuse me of anything. Quote. Right away, he went quiet, scanning me up and down like he was searching for something. I just met his gaze unwaveringly, not wanting to lose the battle of gaslighting. Ha. In the end, he huffed and gave up, grinning as he threw his hands up in defeat. Nothing. Just try not to watch too much porn just because I'm not home, kid. With that, he closed the door and left. Son of a bitch. I scowled, feeling my mood had soured. Click. But with his defeat, I could finally go back to editing the video, huh? Damn it, I closed the editing program without saving. Seiji, UMOTHERFUCKER. To be continued.